Hello, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Planning and Transportation on Wednesday, August 28th, 2024. Ms. Dow, could you please call the roll?
Chair Chang,
Present.
Vice Chair Rectal,
Here.
Commissioner Aiken,
Here.
Commissioner Heckman,
Here.
Commissioner Liu,
Here.
Commissioner Suma.
I just received a message saying that she will be absent.
Okay, absent. Commissioner Templeton.
I'm here remote.
Commissioner Templeton, I believe you are remote because of just cause. If you could just confirm that you are in the room by yourself.
I am in the room isolating by myself. Thank you.
We're very sorry that you're isolating. All right, thank you. Okay, so our first item of business tonight is public comment for items that are not on the agenda. Are there any speaker cards or raised hands online?
I have no request to speak.
Okay, wonderful. So then the next item, do we have any agenda changes, additions, and deletions? I don't know if staff has anything that I'm getting no's. Okay, then great. On to city official reports. So if you'd like to take it away.
Sure. Good evening. So I'm Coleman Frick, Long Range Planning Manager, filling in for Amy French as the liaison this evening. And we also have our director, Jonathan Late, available on Zoom.
Can you speak closer to the microphone? Thank you.
Do you want me to repeat that or?
I think we got it.
Okay. And then we also have Nathan Baird with the Office of Transportation, who's available as well to provide some information. So just want to go over this upcoming meeting schedule for the PTC. So on September 11th, we have one item on the agenda, which is 70 Encina. And then we have 3 items that are listed for the September 25th agenda, and 3 items listed in the sort of upcoming future agendas in October and November.
Okay, thank you. Does Mr. Baird have anything? Oh, you're still going.
And then for upcoming council items that pertain to PTC review, the slide shows some of those items. And the first one in September is in italics because it may change to October. And then
there we go. Good evening, all. It's good to be here. I am filling in for Raphael. Originally, we were going to have a couple of parking items, or a parking item and a Palo Alto Link data review, but we've pushed those back a little bit. But I'm still here. Have one update from Raphael about some Caltrain work that is happening on the Churchill crossing near Alma. They have a temporary sidewalk closure there with a pedestrian detour to the south side of Churchill. They expect to have that finished next week. That is it.
Is that it?
That is it.
Any questions from the commission? Okay, seeing no lights, we're going to move on to the next agenda item. So tonight on our agenda, we have 2 things that have been continued from our last meeting. And we are taking these items as separate agenda items, even though they were initially posted for the very first time as a single item. So the items as written on the agenda are to recommend the City Council adopt the draft ordinances updating the Palo Alto Municipal Code, Chapter 18.40 and Section 18.40.250 on lighting, and adding a new section 18.40.280 for bird-friendly design. So we are going to take the first topic on lighting first, have that discussion, vote on it, and then we will discuss the bird-friendly design. So last time we took public comment, and so at this time, so my understanding is that there's not going to be an updated staff presentation. Is that correct?
That's correct. There
Okay,
is
so
no
last
update.
time we heard the staff presentation and then took public comment and said that we would open it up this time for any members of the public who did not already speak at the last meeting and would like to speak. So do we have any speaker cards regarding the lighting item?
Yes, just one from Shani Kleinhaus.
I believe we heard from
She
Shani
spoke
Klein.
on the bird.
Oh, not on the, okay, thank you for reminding me. Okay, please come on up, Ms. Kleinhaus.
It's a little different, mostly the same. So, thank you, Chair Chang and commissioners. Dash spoke to most of what is on this handout already last time, but we added one recommendation. So our hope that tonight you will look into our Sierra Club and Audubon recommendations and include them in the motion that will move forward to City Council for lighting. The one thing that we added is similar to Cupertino, that light should not be visible above 3 feet of a public right-of-way. This comes from the fact that sometimes you'll have lighting that really kind of blinds people walking in the street. There's one of those lights in my street that has been quite disturbing. So hopefully that will be included as well. And just to remind you that lighting is a pervasive disturbance to natural ecosystems at all levels, from the cellular level to the organism, to communities and ecosystems. And in its impact, it's similar to climate change, but it's a lot easier to fix. So thank you for your help on this issue. Thank you. One more thing, Dash last time when he spoke, he suggested that you move the lighting forward, but not the bird safe design. I repeat that request.
Thank you, Ms. Kleinhaus. Are there any other speaker cards or anything online?
No, just the one.
Okay, great. So then at this time, I think we would bring it back to the commission for, staff.
Oh, just one thing I want to mention based on my understanding is that I don't believe that there were questions on the staff's presentation at the last meeting before it was continued. So we also have the presentation slides available if there's anything we want to revisit, if there's questions from the commission on those slides or staff's presentation from the last meeting.
Perfect, thank you. That's a good segue into what I was just about to say. So it'd be great if we could pull, get the staff presentation ready, because at this point we did not do clarifying questions from the commission to staff regarding the presentation. So I would like to start off with that and see if there are any clarifying questions from the commission. And if you have anything, please raise your hand or push your light. All right, let's start with Commissioner Aiken.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have about a half dozen here. Packet page 22, section C3, which discusses when installation of new fixtures triggers applicability. Fixtures can be replaced as part of ordinary maintenance. So is it your intent to apply the ordinance in that case, as well as in the more obvious cases like upgrades?
So that was initial intention. So because it's outdoor lighting, and if there's any changes to the outdoor lighting, that maybe it's the time that they can upgrade and comply with the new standards. But that's definitely up to the Planning and Transportation Commission to discuss and modify if wishes to.
Yeah, I bring that up just because it's not obvious to me what the trigger event will be that causes an evaluation of the change. So you might want to think about whether that needs to be clarified. Also on packet page 22, E1D, and this is no direct offsite glare from a light source. We are moving towards a lot more use of rooftops. So the question is, how does this apply in the case of rooftop lighting?
So generally, the dark sky ordinance principle, the main, I guess, the point is that they want to minimize the uplighting. So that's why the shielded lighting is there. But we do have, so some of those, we have some of exceptions listed here, low voltage outdoor lighting. So usually the rooftop is used for recreational purposes, or they have some outdoor like landscaping lightings. So those are some of those low voltage landscape lights are included as an exception. So for, I guess, as long as they have a shielded light, if it's not outdoor landscaping lighting, it might be okay, but that's also something that the commission can discuss and make modifications if needed.
Yeah, the concern I have is for applications like, rooftop bars or other well-lit activities for which lighting is likely to be visible from a wide range. And I think that may need to be thought about a little more carefully. Packet page 23, E3B. Let's see, that is the foot candle standard at the property line. So I like the way this is expressed. I mean, we can certainly talk about what the appropriate illumination level should be. But it seems to me that simply using the lumen rating of the light source would be a lot easier to enforce, because you just need to look at the rating for the lamp rather than go out there at night and take a measurement in the field. And in fact, lumens are already used in the ordinance in a number of other places as the criterion, like E1, E Roman numeral 1 on the same page. So I was curious as to how you decided that a foot candle measurement was going to be easier for enforcement. That's the justification used in the analysis.
The foot candle is used usually in planning. So when development application is submitted, they usually provide a lighting plan, which includes foot candle information. So those are some of the usual practice and information we usually review. That's why we've decided to continue that information. But that's also, it's also possible that we can switch that back to lumens if the commission wishes to.
Okay, so the usual policy is you don't actually go make a measurement in the field. You use the plans that are submitted as the computation for this.
Mm-hmm. So that will be something that they would have to submit as part of their application. And so we'll have a record of that.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Page 24, E4D, Roman numeral 3. This concerns solar-powered pathway lights, and we're doing a great job of acquiring all of our electricity from green sources these days, and one might expect that we'll get even better at it. So why only solar-powered pathway lights? Why doesn't this apply in all cases? The luminosity limit could be all that matters, regardless of the power source.
I might have to get back to you on that one and then follow up on that.
Okay, thank you. Back at page 25, section F3. This is gasoline service stations. And the obvious question is, does this apply to EV charging stations as well? And if not, why not?
Sorry, could you So for the gasoline service station lighting section,
So packet page 25, section F3.
Chair, if I may, ask Commissioner Aiken, what packet is he using? Because it doesn't match this week's packet. I haven't been able to follow along with his numbers.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is what I'm using the numbers that I got from the emailed commission documents.
Commissioner Templeton, it matches with the most recent packet that I received that was delivered on Thursday, I think.
And the packet page,
Yes, the packet page seems to be correct. If it's kind of, I mean,
Yeah, I think I may be confusing the issue by using the entire designation for the section. And like in this case, the F for F3 is actually on packet page 24. The section just extends over 2 pages.
there could be, I may have the wrong packet. I don't know. It's not matching at all. Okay, thank you. Sorry about the interruption.
If Commissioner Templeton's packet numbers are in the 140 range, if they are, then that's the last packet. And to get to this packet, you just subtract 121.
Okay, no, I only have the lower numbers, so it's
really
I'm not
helpful.
worried about it. I'll try and follow along. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, at any rate, section F3, to repeat, the requirements for gasoline service stations, do they apply to electric vehicle charging stations? And if not, why not?
yes, it can be applied to those charging stations. So we can change the title so that it applies to both.
Thank you. I think that would be helpful because it was a little surprising. All right, last one, packet page 26, section G2.
26 sheet.
This is the subjective standard for prohibitive lighting that unnecessarily illuminates any other lot and some other criteria. And the question I had here was, why is this not an objective measure like the one in E3B, where a similar case is handled with
I'm sorry,
a
could
measurement?
you repeat the page number of the packet?
So the question is about packet page 26, section G2, which says lighting that unnecessarily illuminates any other lot or substantially interferes with the use or enjoyment of that lot is prohibited. And I was worried that this was so subjective that it could lead to difficulty. And in fact, elsewhere in the ordinance, you do use objective measures. And the one that came to mind right away was E3B, which is on packet page 23. That's the 1/2 foot candle measurement at the abutting property line. So why the subjective measure rather than just another objective measure like you used elsewhere?
I think we might have been trying to capture wide variety of reasons, but we can definitely consider adding objective measurement, or also we can also remove that particular provision.
Yeah, I guess, well, I may have to refrain from making a suggestion at this point, but at any rate, it struck me as different from the other cases, so it was worth asking about. Thank you, that's all I have.
I'm not seeing other lights, so I guess I'll go right now. And in the meantime, people can hit their light if they would like to speak. So I will be using the old packet from last time. So I need to subtract 121, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so old packet 131, which I think means packet page 10. So my question about the lighting ordinance is how, and the 3,000 Kelvin recommendation, is that does it conflict with other regulations such as safety regulations that there may be? And if so, I'm just wondering where there may or may not be a conflict and how we would address it.
I don't think it's necessarily conflict. So we have initially thought about 2700 Kelvin. But then after initial research into and in discussion with other departments, we have found out that their preference is 4000 Kelvin for their operation and surveillance reasons. But we still wanted to be consistent with the principles of the dark sky ordinance or principles, so that we were trying to kind of gauge which way to go. 4000 was a little bit too bright for dark sky principles, but we've seen other cities had 3000 Kelvin. So maybe that was a good balance and chose 3000 instead of 2700. But that is something that Planning and Transportation Commission can discuss and make modifications as needed.
Okay. Are there OSHA regulations in specific situations that might require a brighter?
I think for surveillance reasons, so for police and fire, they might prefer brighter colors, brighter temperature because of their surveillance reason and operations. But that's what we've heard from the fire department,
Okay.
4000.
But to your knowledge, there's no like federal requirements, for example?
I don't believe so, but I can follow up and find out.
I think it would just, yeah. Another question I have is on packet page, I think 13. So old packet page 134. So it mentioned that ARB had suggested creating a light sensitive area designation similar to the bird sensitive area designation. And I just wanted to find out what staff's reaction was to that idea.
Right. So I think that was a good idea. So we have actually staff considered it. It was just that compared to bird sensitive, there was no actual threshold that we can actually follow. It was difficult to identify what would be sensitive, light sensitive, what would be light insensitive. So the threshold was kind of difficult to find the data source. So we have decided to forego that idea. But if that's something that commissioners would like the staff to consider, that's something that we can take some time, but it might be a little bit difficult because we don't have that kind of data. For bird sensitive, there were other ordinances that actually had the research done and found the distance, appropriate distance. So it was easier to kind of identify those thresholds, but for lighting, it's kind of difficult.
Okay, thank you. That's just good background for us all. Okay, next question is on packet page 14. Old packet page 135. I just wanted some education on lumens versus foot candles, because I had the same question that Commissioner Aiken did, which is I just remodeled my house and all the light fixtures tell me how many lumens there are, but they don't tell me how many foot candles there are. So can you just educate me, because I don't really know what the difference is?
Well, I'm not a lighting expert, but I'll try my best. So my understanding is that foot candle is basically the number. So like 1 foot candle means 1 lumen on a square foot. Yeah. So that's the foot candle. So that's sort of, I guess it's associated with lumens as well. We've just explained in a staff report and previously also orally, it's just something that we always get with the lighting plan. So it's a lot, staff thought it might be easier to just continue that practice, but obviously the commission can have some modifications to that.
Okay, thank you. On the same page, staff has included in the ordinance that motion sensors would deactivate after a maximum of 10 minutes. And I was looking at the model ordinance that was proposed, and it had suggested 5 minutes. Could you tell me why staff thought 10 was better than 5?
So we've had looked at multiple ordinances throughout the cities. There are 5 minutes from the ordinance, model ordinance. Other cities had 15 minutes also. So we were looking at the range and we just kind of chose the average.
Split the
Yeah.
difference. Got it. Okay. And then, yeah, that's it. So next we're going to have Commissioner Rectal and then Commissioner Heckman. And then Commissioner Liu.
Okay, back on the new packet, page 25. This is the gas service station lighting. Commissioner Aiken talked about. They talk about 12.5 foot candles. I went down the street and looked at a current, what's a current typical service station at these days? How bright would it be if I measured it today?
Staff is not aware of that, but I can follow up and
Yeah, because I'm just curious,
confirm that information.
how onerous is this for the gas station? If they're all at 13, this is not a big deal. If they're all at 25, then this may really change things. Okay, what do other cities have for their dark skies?
So this is basically, we've looked at the model ordinance in other cities. We mainly looked at the Cupertino's ordinance as a base and then looked at other cities to kind of compare. So I think it's a similar, if it's not the same, I can just confirm that. The 12.5 is basically
Typical.
the typical, yeah.
Okay, and what about, this is one specific outdoor business, but we also have like car dealerships or drive-throughs or other areas where business is outside. Why do we just do it service stations and not a broader?
Those will be included as part of the non-residential. So if it's, the dealership will be basically treated like any other commercial or non-residential buildings. But if the commission thinks that it needs a special purpose lighting section for the dealerships or any other particular use, that can be also discussed and staff can come back with some additional information as well.
So what is the?
Typically, the gas stations have brighter lights because they often, operate 24 hours. And so we wanted to make sure that that is something that we discuss and make sure that that's also somehow, if not completely consistent, at least have some standards so that they can operate, but also.
So what is the constraint on car dealership?
We don't have a special use or a special section for car dealerships, so it'll be just treated as any other non-residential buildings.
And what's the limit on that?
We don't have lumens, the 3000 Kelvin would be, and then we have a foot candle information. So any other, the lighting guidelines, the standards, shielding, height, illumination level, and the curfew, all those will apply to car dealerships as well.
Okay, and so would we consider doing instead of gasoline service station, have any 24-hour business or have hours or something where this would apply to?
Unless they have, we don't, I can definitely confirm that this information, whether the gas stations have a close of business time as part of their approval. But it'll be, if not, it'll be 10 p.m. Unless we have a specify in our ordinance.
Okay, so this section applies to all service stations regardless if they're 24 hours or not?
So this section is so this section applies to, this is a special purpose lighting. So this is, it will, unless it is listed in that particular section, they are expected to comply with the other citywide, other sections, other requirements in the ordinance. So for example, the light fixtures and fascia and those kind of the light foot candles are listed there, which are different from the previous provisions. So if we would like to, and then we don't have any particular time curfew here. If we think, if the curfew is needed, we can definitely add that information there. But otherwise, it'll be just following the other previous provisions that's listed in the ordinance. Is that clear?
If I can try to help clarify, so there's other sections of the code that regulate business hours or as,
Speak closer.
sorry, there's other sections of the code that regulate business hours or like as indicated in a use permit or something like that. So it kind of depends on what the outdoor use may be and what those regulations are elsewhere in the code. The reason that I think service stations are called out specifically, which seems to be part of your question, is that it is a business that typically operates at hours where lighting would be required and lighting is necessary for the function of the business outdoors in the evenings. So a car dealership is a little bit different than that in some cases. I guess maybe different times of year it could be slightly different, but in order for the typical operations to occur for a service station, typically there needs to be lighting.
Yeah, maybe I'm just being pedantic here, but to me, it seems like 7-Elevens or something, what would be different between a 7-Eleven 24 hours a day and a gas station 24 hours a day? And maybe
so I think, if it's a 7-Eleven where it's not associated with a gas station, then you don't really need to be outside of the building to be a patron of the 7-Eleven. If you're using gas, like if you're pumping gas at a service station, that occurs outdoors. And so lighting is sort of a more sensitive issue because it can't be contained necessarily within the building itself.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it, Commissioner? Okay. Commissioner Heckman?
Thank you. So let's start on packet page 22, where the term in section E1A, fully shielded. I think I saw in the staff presentation an example of fully and partially shielded. Could you pull that back up? So fully shielded is either better or best, correct? Okay. So I'm going to use, for some of these questions, the example of my house and my current porch light, right? Which is basically a glass box about the size of a loaf of bread. And inside that glass box, it has two of these bulbs. These are 40-watt teardrop bulbs, right? And standing outside, you can see through the glass to the bulb, right? So that is not fully shielded, is it?
That's not fully shielded.
Okay, all right. So under this ordinance, there will be circumstances where if I replace that fixture, I'm going to have to replace it with something that is fully shielded.
Yes, if the applicability doesn't change, that would be the case.
Okay. Next question. My current porch light, if I stand out on the sidewalk today, I can see it directly with my eyes. And intentionally so. That's really kind of its purpose. So when we look on packet page 20, and I don't have to, incidentally, my eyes are about 5.5 feet. I haven't bent down to 3 feet, but I'm pretty sure if I did, I could still see the bulbs directly. So when we look at, on packet page 22, E, subpart 1D, no direct offsite glare from a light source shall be visible above 3 feet at the public right-of-way. So is the fact that you can see my bulb above 3 feet standing on the street in front of my house, is that going to make my house violate the ordinance?
So I think the way that it's written, my understanding of the intent is that it's about the light itself spilling off beyond a certain threshold, not the visibility of like the light source, like specifically, but sort of how far the light is passing. But I think that Ms. Cha might be able to provide some additional detail.
Yes, that's correct. As you can see from the illustration there, that we're talking about the lighting that's spilling out. So that's what the intention is, not the actual light source itself.
Well, but the only reason I can see the light from the street is that the light is traveling to me, right? So it seems like while I don't yet have an obligation to replace it, maybe we're going to have more questions. I might be in violation.
I think where it's tricky to sort of answer the question in that way is that, you know, not knowing exactly where the height of the light is versus sort of where it's being viewed from. I think it can be a little bit more tricky to sort of do a scenario like in all cases in a similar manner, because, you know, depending on sort of the elevation or the height of the light fixture or where someone's looking from, it can change the context a little bit.
Okay, so when we come back around to discussions, not questions, maybe we'll talk about how we can clarify this language so that it's not confusing and site specific. Okay, packet page 23. We've heard a couple of references to the, let's see, it's section E3, illumination level. A couple of commissioners asked about the 3000 Kelvin. I just want to make sure I understand. My impression from the staff report and your comments today is that the police and fire are not desirous of that 3000 Kelvin standard. They would prefer, for safety reasons, 4000 Kelvin. Am I understanding that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you have more?
And then, I mean, there's always a way to kind of go around is to establish some exceptions if that's needed. For example, there may be some needs for exceptions for private properties, maybe for security lighting purposes. So if that's the case, we can definitely lower it or have some additional exception language to accommodate that as well.
Okay. All right. Next question, still on packet page 23, subpart 4, which is lighting control A. It's a curfew, 10 p.m. curfew, right? So my porch light. Does this provision require me to turn off my porch light at 10 o'clock at night?
That's correct. So we've changed it after ARB meeting. So we initially had applicability. There's additional information here if you compare, I mean, you don't have to compare, but from the ARB ordinance to PTC ordinance, there's some changes because previously at the ARB meeting, the representative from the Sierra Club has said that maybe it's something that we can easily do without having too much cost burden to all of the residents in the city of Palo Alto. So we have added the language here that not so the curfew will be applying to everything. Unlike the applicability only applies that says that new construction, substantial remodel, and fixture replacement or new ones.
Okay.
But yes, 10 p.m. curfew will apply.
All right. And then next page 24, exceptions, number D1, one little I. There's an exception for a building entrance, which my front door is, if they're required to be illuminated after 10 by the California Building Code or state law. So I don't believe there is a state law or building code requiring my front door to be lit after 10, is there?
We can definitely confirm that information and follow up. I don't think there is, yeah.
Okay, all right. So that means that the curfew would apply to my house.
Building.
All right. Okay, packet page 25. The very last line on the page. The distance between nighttime lighting and the riparian corridor of a stream should be maximized. So does that mean that when I'm anywhere near a riparian corridor of a stream and I want to build a new house, I have to build that house as far from the stream as possible so that the lighting for that house is as far from the stream as possible?
So according to the language right now, that's probably not as objective as it should be. As the Planning and Transportation Commission know, there's a stream corridor protection ordinance update. We have that coming up soon. So what we can do is either we refer to that particular section of the code so that we have a lighting information with associated with streams there, since that's coming later than this particular ordinance, so that it has more objective distance or standards included.
Okay. Let's see, last question. Packet page 26. Exemptions. The following types of lighting are exempt from the lighting requirements. Number one, illuminated street numbers on a building facade. So again, taking my house as an example, I've got that porch light on the wall next to the door. 2 feet in front of that, I've got a pole, just a little decorative 2x2 that has our street number on it. And that light does help people see the street number, but the street number is not on the facade. So does this not apply to me because my street numbers are not on the facade?
When we were preparing this was addition that ARB requested, so we have added this particular exemption. Staff wasn't aware of that kind of situation, so we can definitely remove that on a building facade from that exemption provision.
We can talk about that.
Yep.
Right. Okay. All right, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Heckman. And on to Commissioner Liu and then Templeton.
Oh, thank you. I have a few clarifying questions. So first of all, does Palo Alto have any regulations on interior lights in unoccupied office or other commercial buildings? And was anything considered for this ordinance?
So the interior lights are not considered at this. So these are zoning code. So basically we have discretion over buildings and the site conditions. So this particular ordinance is just regulating the outdoor.
Okay, got it. On packet page 22, section E1C, I want to clarify the point about light fixtures should be located at least 3 feet from curbs and 10 feet from driveways or intersections to avoid obstructing clear sight distance triangles. I think this is mainly in reference potentially to single family homes. So I just want to clarify, does that mean that we like how would this affect street lights, for example? Like street lights are on the sidewalk or like right on the curb. So how does that work?
Street lights are not something that we have discretion over in the zoning ordinance. So the zoning, so we can't really have any regulations on street lighting as part of this zoning ordinance.
Okay.
So zoning codes are
interesting.
only regulating.
Yep.
So we have other municipal code section and titles that has regulations for street lighting and anything that are in public
Right of way.
properties.
Mhm.
But for zoning code, we do have, we only have regulations on for private properties. So that's kind of like separated.
Okay. Okay. Kind of piggybacking off of Commissioner Rechtel's point, can you clarify a little bit about how this applies to outdoor dining, both I know there's a reference to the permanent parklet ordinance, which we don't have yet, but is there a reason there isn't a reference to other forms of outdoor dining, like when discussing the permanent parklet ordinance?
So we do have parklets reference in the zoning code, just because there were some discussions and some concerns that might have some comments related to parklets. But usually for outdoor dining that are located in the sidewalk, those are public right-of-way, where zoning code really doesn't have any discretion over. So that's why we're trying to avoid having those references. But for rooftop properties, as Commissioner Rector has mentioned, we can definitely look into those. But generally, to be consistent with the dark sky principles, we'll recommend similar recommendations for those as well.
Okay. I think beyond rooftop properties, there's also outdoor dining, like Backyard Brew is a cafe that's kind of entirely premised on being outdoors, and they do stay open at night. So I would be curious to think later on about how to give Backyard Brew some discretion on how to actually manage their own business. Finally, I have a question about code enforcement. So how do we envision that working here?
Could you?
Oh, for code enforcement.
So is the question about it whether if someone installs a light fixture that doesn't go through a building permit, or there's a complaint?
Yeah,
based on the time of day, or is that the question? Just
yeah,
to make
if
sure.
someone complains, if someone's clearly non-compliant, how do we envision the enforcement happening?
So if it's, if it like Ms. Cha is saying is on private property, then we would just handle it as a typical code enforcement case. So, there would be a case opened. If, someone's complaining, they would typically like maybe provide some documentation. It does raise a question though, which is, typically our code enforcement staff isn't available like at the times that they would need to go up and do a site visit for this. So, they could definitely look at a fixture potentially, but maybe they couldn't see the same thing. They might have to rely on some degree on photos that were provided by whoever lodged the complaint. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that is really helpful. Can you also refresh us on what the penalties are if the code and, if the issue is not addressed by the property owner?
That's outlined in the code. I don't have that readily available because it's through a different division in the department.
Okay.
But we could get back to you on that.
Yeah, I think that'd be good to clarify. I also see that Director Late has a hand up.
Oh, okay. Let's pass it over to him then.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Liu, and through the chair. I think the commission has brought up several good points here as we're hearing questions to the draft ordinance. Commissioner Aiken, I think, was questioning earlier the applicability section and specifically with light fixtures. And I think this ties into Commissioner Liu's question about enforcement. And so I do think there is a fair, we would appreciate the commission's feedback on the applicability of the ordinance relative to items that may not require a building permit. That's usually the threshold by which we can determine whether something has received approval or not. I am very concerned about any kind of enforcement activity on if we're suddenly requiring shielding on lights and we've got all these residences, in town that don't have that kind of protection, shielding, then suddenly going out and doing code enforcement activity for everybody who's now in violation of the ordinance. It's not practical. We're not really going to be able to do that kind of enforcement of this ordinance. So we certainly not with the enforcement staff that we have now. So enforcement of shielded light fixtures and in particular single family residential properties is not feasible. So again, I think it's appropriate for the commission to talk about applicability and what's the trigger. And I think Ms. Cha had noted earlier, new construction or substantial remodels might be a couple of areas for the commission to start that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Late. Did you have more, Commissioner Liu, before we move to Commissioner Templeton?
No, that's all for clarifying questions.
Okay, great. Commissioner Templeton, thanks for your patience.
Thank you all. I just appreciate staff bringing this issue before us and drafting up this ordinance. And we do have a lot of questions, and I appreciate the questions from the other commissioners. Just to follow up on the code enforcement question, and it's complaint driven entirely. Is that what I heard you guys say?
Staff believes there's no proactive enforcement, code enforcement, so it'll be completely complaint-based.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm thinking about some questions that Commissioner Heckman brought up about the lighting curfew. He was mentioning the first part of the lighting curfew, which was that have your lights off by 10 p.m. But the rest of the sentence is or after close of business or when people are no longer present. So does that mean if you're having friends pick up somebody from a party at your house at 11, you can leave your light on?
The intention of that particular phrase was to for the non-residential uses mostly, because we may have some, even if they close at 10 p.m., there may be some maintenance that they need to do afterwards. So that was the intention, but we can definitely modify that language so that, or even separate them out to be more clear as well.
I think it's not clear at all in the way it's written right now. And I would say that when I use my front porch light at night, it's because my daughter's friends' parents are coming to pick her friend up when they're hanging out together during the day. So like there are points that it would be silly to think we can't use our front porch light to get safely out of our driveway or have our friends get safely out of our driveway. So I would just want to make sure that's as clear as possible, because that's a pretty common use case.
I just wanted to remind Commissioner Templeton, because staff isn't chiming in on this one, but there's a timing. There's lights can also be put on timer with motion sensor. And so that might solve this problem. It may not solve the problem that you're talking about too.
I think it would. I mean, when I do put that porch light on, I have a timer on it and it will go on when somebody triggers it, but not everybody has that particular appliance. So it's a good point. So yeah, back to safety. I'm thinking to Commissioner Aiken's questions about the service station lighting. We haven't, so in a lot of cases, at least in my experience in the past, maybe it's not true here, but the lighting at gas stations is not just functional, it's about safety. We've had in places where I grew up that wasn't here. We've had, lots of kind of crimes of opportunity happening at gas stations at night. And so, they want to have more lighting to prevent that. Is that going to be affected by your gasoline service station lighting plan? Like security, in other words?
Staff doesn't believe so, but we can definitely look into it and see, because as the Commissioner Wachtel has requested, we can look into the current lighting level and see if we need to actually modify that particular provision on foot candles and lumens, light intensity.
And then, yeah, I agree. Take a closer look, and my add to what Commissioner Rectal or Vice Chair Rectal said is just make sure we're not compromising safety and security by these adjustments at gas stations. Thank you.
In addition to that, staff is not currently proposing to change the existing lighting to comply with the new standards. So even if we do have these new provisions, unless there's a new gas stations or they're changing significantly on their lighting, it won't really impact their operations at this moment.
I think that's good to know, but I would not want any new, well, assuming we did have new service stations, I would not want them to be unsafe. Okay, so my last question, go ahead.
Oh, just if I may, I think that's a great point. And I think, staff, the intent isn't to propose anything that would cause any safety concern within the community. That's not the intent of the regulations. It's come up a bit about sort of like what happens in sort of these safety scenarios. And I think that this was included. Unfortunately, I wasn't present at the last meeting where the staff presentation occurred and was continued, but I believe that the slide was shown of like a carve out for city operations and safety related to that lighting. And then the commission could also consider, other exceptions in a case that there's a safety concern on private property, similar to kind of what's being raised about, the service stations, to make sure that there is an opportunity to revisit it if it were to be an issue. That being said, we will look into kind of those questions raised about, how the existing service station lighting that's in place compares to what the regulations are proposing.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, because I do think that this was written with the best of intentions. I think, as a woman who has been scared pumping gas in her car before in places other than Palo Alto, I will just say I wanted to make sure we were explicitly thinking about that, because it is on the mind of at least half the people. So I want to make sure we're taking that into consideration, and I'm glad to hear that you are. And my last question was about the string lighting. Have we talked at all about what that means for holiday lights?
So seasonal lighting is not, so string lighting is not considered seasonal lighting, but, and we have a definite, seasonal lighting is exempted as well. So if it's part of the seasonal lighting, I think that might be exempted, but if it's not during that seasonal, the period of time, it might have to comply with the provision there under the string lighting.
If I have a picnic table or, set up in my backyard to grill out at night, does that affect those lights?
If it is, so string, yeah, if you have string lights in the backyard, that would apply. Initially, staff had some additional regulations that it might be okay if it's not visible from the public right of way. But there were some concerns that might not be as objective as well. But that's something that commission can consider and maybe make modifications if that's needed.
Okay, well, thank you for answering my clarifying questions. That's all I have for now.
All right, thank you. So now that we've finished with clarifying questions, I don't see any other lights. We're gonna just continue discussion now with our comments. So I have a question for my colleagues. The way I was thinking about handling this was to kind of go through the 5 bullet areas that staff has highlighted for us on packet page 1. I need to look at packet page 13, I think. So it starts with applicability, then there's shielding, then illumination level, then lighting control and special purpose lighting. And that way, maybe we can kind of work our way through sections of the code rather than bouncing around all over. What are my colleagues' thoughts? Does that sound like a good plan? Okay, everybody.
I was thinking of more of a just free-flowing discussion, but I could go either way.
I just find it easier when we're discussing back and forth to be able to react to each other's topics, but
then aren't we setting ourselves up for basically 5 times 6, 30 separate comment periods?
Let's go with Commissioner Heckman's plan. And we'll try that. And Commissioner Aiken, did you have?
Yeah, actually, I was going to respond in much the same vein as Commissioner Heckman.
Wonderful.
But I can make comments if we're ready to start.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. In general, I really support this ordinance, but we have mentioned a lot of specifics that need to be thought through here, and I'm not quite sure how we're going to proceed with that. We certainly can't answer all the questions that have been raised tonight and redesign the ordinance from the dais. So I need to think about that a little more, and perhaps someone else will have some insight. In the meantime, I have a relatively new house, and the lighting was designed by a lighting engineer. I've got lamps ranging from 2,700 Kelvin up to 4,000 Kelvin. I have exactly one 4,000 Kelvin lamp, and it's on a 1-minute timer, and it's outside. And the reason it's there is that it's over a dark colored surface. And the first time I went through, I tried to walk out there at night to take the trash out. I understood why that was there, because on that surface, without enough light of an appropriate color, it really is like stepping into a pit. So there's occasionally a safety issue there. 3,000 Kelvin seems like a good compromise to me between impact and effectiveness, but picking another number is not going to make so much difference that it would cause me to change my mind about the ordinance. So whatever criteria we can use to determine that is likely going to be okay with me. There were a lot of the specifics that I mentioned earlier during the clarifying questions that I think are significant. Some of them are nits. We need to work on the service stations question and using objective measures where we can, and understanding applicability in cases like rooftop dining, where there's going to be a lot of light out there that's visible from the positions that are specified in this ordinance. So I don't understand how that will be handled. I guess that's enough for this pass. We'll move on to someone else now.
Commissioner Heckman?
So I like the concept of this ordinance, but when we start to look at the details, it gives me a lot of concerns. You know, like the vast majority of the residents of Palo Alto, I live in the flats rather than the Palo Alto Hills, where, you know, we're in a suburban sense, you know, densely put together. So we're not spread out over acres and acres. And I think it's a different experience up in the Palo Alto Hills, where they are spread out in acres and acres, and there's less light, and they can, you know, hope to see the Milky Way. But I never expect to see the Milky Way, because I, you know, was happy to make this trade-off to be a part of this more vibrant, denser community. And that community at night is lit. And the primary purpose for most of that lighting is safety in one form or another. Whether it's the street lights or the lights on the house, you know, there are some lights that are really just for decorative, to show off the walkway leading to the house, or some, you know, tree. You know, some people have a, you know, gorgeous tree, and so they have a light illuminating it. And there are some examples of that, but most of the lighting really has some safety function. And so, for example, my porch light. We leave that with its 2 little 40-watt bulbs on all night. And that provides comfort to my family. And I also think it provides comfort and a small safety factor to people who pass by on my street, whether they're driving or walking. That happens a lot after 10 o'clock. It was interesting after our last meeting, when we started talking about this. As I drove home, I decided it was after 10 o'clock, and I decided I would look at all the houses that I'm passing to verify my belief that nearly everyone leaves their porch light on at night. And I was surprised to find that it's not true, that maybe I'd say between 50 and 60% of the houses I passed leave their porch light on after 10 o'clock. So that was kind of an education to me. But I still like that level of lighting, and I still feel like it provides for more safety. And so really my comments particularly about particular parts of this ordinance really relate to that. And so the first, I've got sort of 3 comments. The first one is on the light level, the Kelvin light level of 3,000 versus 4,000. So again, I'm thinking safety first. And if our police department is telling us, as I believe our public works department told us when they were here working on the facility down by the duck pond, they think it's safer to have a brighter light. And so I'm hesitant to not take the advice of our safety officials on a matter of safety. And so I'm inclined to lean toward 4,000 Kelvin, and rather than carve out some kind of exception for a situation like Commissioner Aiken has, where it's really useful to have 4,000, but now I'd have to go get some kind of special permission from the city or risk a violation when my neighbor complains. Second issue is the 10 o'clock curfew. I really don't like that idea for my porch light. I don't want my block to be dark after 10 o'clock. To me, that's not why I'm living in a city. I want it to be lit. I want it to be safe. I want there are occasions when I walked my dog after 10:30. And when my kids were babies, there were many occasions where I was out after 10:30 with a sleepless kid. And I don't want a pitch black environment for that. That doesn't feel safe for me. I think we need to be looking at an exception for the porch light of single family homes, whether they're attached to the facade or not. Or as Director Late said, if we're not just going to exclude them in the applicability section. And then the third issue I have that I want to bring up is the riparian provisions on packet page 25. So I think that those are not ready for prime time. And I think we really have to, again, for example, let's see, this language, nighttime lighting shall be directed away from the riparian corridor of a stream, right? So this applies throughout Palo Alto. My house is 3 blocks from a stream, right? But I have, this doesn't say it doesn't apply to me. I think it's intended to apply really to the last structure before the stream, but it doesn't say that. And similarly, as I brought up before, this idea that you have to maximize the distance between nighttime lighting and a stream, that pushes apart from the fact that it could apply to my house, which is nowhere near a stream, as to the last building before the stream, it pushes that house all the way to as far from the stream as it can be, and maybe changes its shape. And so what I think should happen is we're working on a riparian ordinance. This lighting concept should be discussed in the context of that ordinance. But what we should have here is just, because there will be special rules, I suspect. What we want to do here, I think, is just make a refer people to the stream bed ordinance once that's adopted. And so we're collecting all of the stream regulations at what time, and the commission can talk about them all at one time to see how they fit together. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Heckman. Commissioner Liu?
Yeah, I want to start with some specific comments and also a couple more questions. I'm also hesitant about the curfew for existing buildings. And I know everyone's talking about their own building. I know that might not be the most helpful thing. But I live in a multifamily building where the exit lights are on the same wiring as the lights in the common areas. So at night, and also during the day, but that's another story I'm taking up during the HOA. With the HOA, all the lights are on for exits and for just illumination of the common areas. My understanding is that for my building, to actually decouple those would be a very expensive exercise, potentially tens of thousands of dollars, because they're it's a 40-unit building. It's kind of a weirdly shaped lot. There's a lot of wiring that needs to be redone. And if this were required for my building on day one, we would not be able to comply for quite a while, and we would have significant cost. I imagine this could be a situation for many other multifamily homes or even commercial properties where unless we're willing to not require illuminated exit signs or illuminated safety signs, which I think is probably a big stretch in terms of safety or statewide regulations, we would otherwise be asking these many people to spend thousands of dollars potentially. So I think there's got to be some solution here, but it's probably needs to be phased out or potentially tied to a substantial remodel. So that's my first comment. I also want to go back to the point about what you were talking about how this really only applies to zoning and therefore wouldn't apply to streetlights or potentially other certain public facilities or public lighting sources. So to kind of comment on Commissioner Heckman's concern that you would walk down the street and it'd be like dark at night, that wouldn't be the case necessarily, right? Because none of the streetlights would be covered by these shielding requirements, and presumably the streetlights are the majority of the light on a block at night.
So street lighting that are located in public right-of-ways, they would have to comply with the other titles of the municipal code. So that as long as they're public, located in the public right-of-ways, we wouldn't be able to regulate those. And so there will be some lighting on streets if that particular street has street lighting on it.
Okay, and that would also apply to like the string lighting on trees on University Ave, for example.
Potentially anything that's in the public right of way, potentially.
Okay.
So including, I think the parklets are sort of an interesting example that you raised, because obviously that's in the public right of way, but it might be associated with a private business, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that does allay a lot of the safety concerns for me, but it also, I think I was maybe just tripped up in the staff presentation how there was like pictures of streetlights shielding, and I thought that there'd be some long-term path for dark skies in that context, but I think that's just totally outside of the scope of this conversation, right?
Yeah, I think that would be sort of a separate policy discussion for the council in terms of like if there's some direction they want to provide as part of like the CIP program for, I don't know, the street light like replacement program. But obviously that's kind of in the realm of another department, so I wouldn't want to speak to that in detail.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I have a few specific notes, but I could like glaze over them and potentially send them offline. In general, I think I agree with some of my other commissioners that I really want to make this work, but I think the current ordinance as it is not ready for me to recommend to council. I think one potential way to help this move faster is to look into the ARB recommendation of light sensitive areas. I think this might be closer or almost ready for west of Foothill or east of 101, for example. But for Palo Alto as a whole, I think there are just so many questions that would be ambiguous and in some cases onerous, like for multifamily buildings with old wiring that need to be sorted out.
Is that it? Okay, so I don't see other, Commissioner Templeton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I want to say again how much I appreciate staff working on this, and I hear my colleagues concerns around it not being ready yet, but I want to tell you that this is something so new and that we really are going to have to plan to iterate on it, and that's okay. I think Commissioner Liu's suggestion of stepping it up by region of the city is a good one, and The
Could you
important,
repeat that, Commissioner Thompson? I just didn't understand. I couldn't hear your last. Commissioner Liu's suggestion to what?
step this plan into, gosh, I'm barely functional with my brain here. To step by region into this kind of ordinance. It might be appropriate in certain areas first, et cetera, whatever that, launch and iterate kind of approach we take makes sense. Because what's most important here is that we are so lucky here in Palo Alto to live by really sensitive lands, right? Like we have places with birds and amphibians and any other kinds of river mammals that we need to worry about their sensitivity, and we haven't been doing that for very long. And this is a step in the right direction. So I think it's okay for us to say that it's not there yet, but we're committed to it. And maybe there are areas we want to try it and then expand it. Those are all acceptable solutions. And I don't want staff to feel discouraged, but because this is hard. Like this is really hard. And you've put a lot of great ideas out here, and we have to respond to them. And that's what we're going to do together. So regarding the rewiring and the difficulties, I acknowledge that in some buildings it could be challenging, but on the other hand, if we're talking about the safety of exit signs, that's not compromisable. So if they need to move that onto a different circuit or rewire them, that's the cost of doing business or running a condo facility. So I'm not too worried about that. I do think that they would step up, and I don't think it's prohibitively expensive. But it is a good point to think about, like, how can we, if we are asking people to lower the lights on areas that are safety related, we have to talk about how we can do that practically and support facilities that need to implement that. So I think there's a little bit more of thought we need to provide for that. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other lights right now from my colleagues, so I'm gonna give my comments. So I just wanted to thank staff for all the work that you've put into this. I'm really excited about this ordinance, and I'm hoping actually that we might not be as far away from something as some of my colleagues have suggested, because I think that a lot of the concerns that have been raised can actually be addressed with respect to applicability. And so if we really are limiting, if we as a commission decide to limit the applicability to major remodels or new construction, which seems to be the most practical path anyway, since it's unenforceable if we don't do that, then I think we actually address a lot of the concerns that have been raised by my fellow commissioners. And as I've often heard here, like, we don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I think the staff has done actually a tremendous amount of research here based on what other cities have implemented. And so in this sense, we're not implementing something that's totally crazy, because they've looked at cities who are neighbors to us also in the flats. And if we think that those cities can do it without any significant problems, then we can too, as long as we address that applicability issue. So when we think about Commissioner Heckman's idea, or Commissioner Heckman's comment about his porch light, and he doesn't have something that's on timer right now because it's an older fixture that's either not on timer or not motion censored, then he'd still be able to continue using his light if we also then address that one specific curfew, to say that for folks who don't have motion sensor capability, then we can still allow them to leave their light on. So, and for some of the other, like Commissioner Liu had mentioned, for his multifamily housing, where the outdoor lighting is on the same circuit as the indoor lighting, and so you can't separate the two. Well, if we said it's not applicable unless there is a major remodel, then that would eliminate that concern too. And for new construction, it shouldn't be difficult to put two systems on two different circuits. That shouldn't be cost prohibitive. So I'm thinking that one issue of applicability might actually, or if we address that one issue of applicability, it might actually solve a lot of our problems. And also give us more time, because, if there is a really big mistake, which it doesn't seem like necessarily there is, because again, other cities have implemented many of these many pieces of this ordinance, then we could actually continue to move ahead if we, could get some comfort around that. I actually really liked a lot of the suggestions given to us by the Sierra Club and by the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. So I'd like to thank them for their specifics, and in general was in agreement with those, except that I have some questions about the 2,700 versus 3,000. I think that the commission would like to discuss that, because I heard several commissioners talk about the light temperature. Also, what was raised about the foot candles versus the lumens. My personal preference as a residential remodeler is that it would be much easier to comply with anything if I can look at the packaging of something and understand whether my fixture is compliant or not. So I think I would need to understand what is the equivalent for the 0.1 foot candles in terms of lumens. But in general, I think we should do something that the average human can understand rather than, if people are trying to do the right thing, let's make it easy for them to do the right thing. And then I really liked Commissioner Heckman's idea about referring to the stream side ordinance rather than writing something specific in this ordinance about that area. And that would make it a lot easier to adopt and avoid, unforeseen consequences. Because I think he pointed out some really good problems with the language as currently written. I did have some other specific suggestions, such as, if something's on timer and motion sensor, I don't see why 5 minutes wouldn't be good enough. But, if that's what sort of the people who've done the research have said that it does work, seems like that could work. So I think I do have a lot of other kind of smaller suggestions like that, but I really like, I like a lot of what the Sierra Club and the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society said. Thank you. Vice Chair Rectal.
Yeah, I too like this. Some of the details I don't think are quite baked out yet. The clock, time of day clock, I think I have not shopped for lights since we remodeled 18 years ago. So is that trivial these days to have a light know what time of day it is? Like motion detectors are easy, and photovoltaic sensors to see if the sun is out are easy. But is time of day, is that easy?
Well, staff is not expert on that particular that devices and the standards and regulations, but speaking from the personal kind of experience, it's easy to sort of like regulate the timing for interior lights as well with the newer technology. So I assume that that's the same for the outdoor lighting.
Okay. If we're going to have anything with time of day in it, I want to make sure that that's something that's reasonable and we're not requiring people to have Cadillacs. This should be something that's, you can go to Home Depot and buy easily.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a comment? Or?
Oh, I was just going to kind of respond to the question as well. So I think that that's something that we could look into in terms of, I think broadly speaking for commercial lighting, it's probably more standard, but I understand the point and the concern about, residential lighting for an individual exterior light fixture or multiple.
Okay. And the other thing that Commissioner Liu brought up is that one of the biggest sources of lights are offices that have their lights bright all night long with big glass windows. And that's going to put out far more lights than anything that I have. And are we addressing that in the future, or what's the plan for that?
That can be something the commission can definitely discuss and include if the commission thinks that that's necessary. The existing lighting section has a provision that basically says, but it's not objective, obviously. It's basically saying that you should basically minimize the light spillage from interior lighting as well. So that can be discussed and included as part of it as a special provision within the ordinance. But at this moment, that is, but that's definitely something that can be discussed, yeah, and
Okay,
included.
But we're not planning to do it on this iteration.
At this moment, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
And sometimes, obviously, the challenge with that is that, as an office building as an example, right? Sometimes, cleaning services occur in the evening, right? So the light can sometimes have a purpose when it is on at night. And that's not something we're really kind of, bringing into these regulations as proposed.
we could put timers on it, motion detectors. And because I drive by, go down El Camino and you see these bright lights and no one's in there and there's no cleaning service. So it's something I think we could attack pretty easily with some type of timing requirement. Then the question also is how bright should it be? Should there be some foot candle requirement? And that gets trickier too. Yeah,
and I think it's an important question. We don't have firm direction from council to kind of pursue that as part of this policy goal.
I don't want to take it too big a bite. I'd rather take smaller bites that are efficient, because you can get this could become a morass if you try
and previously, before this particular effort, I think there are several projects that went through ARB review, and they have attached some conditions related to interior lights. So that can be done as well after, if we don't deal with them as part of this ordinance update.
And
case by case.
The other thing is that I really think the hills and the baylands need more protection than the flatlands. And so I think we do at least eventually want to have two separate categories. I don't know exactly how they would differ right now, but I think I'm much more willing to be restrictive in the baylands and in the foothills than in the rest of Palo Alto. Lumens versus foot candles. I mean, foot candles makes a lot more sense from an impact, right? If you're shining light into the neighbor's yard, if you have a relatively small bulb close to your neighbors, you're affecting them more than if you have a brighter light further away. But enforcement, lumens makes a lot more sense, because you can say, okay, I know this, I can put this anywhere and it's fine. So I have mixed feelings about the foot candles versus lumens, just for enforceability. And finally, the 2700. I mean, I agree with Commissioner Aiken that there are probably spots where 4,000 is better. I'm worried about throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because I suspect that 95% of the lights that we have out in Palo Alto would be just perfectly fine at 2,700. And I'd hate to get rid of that just because of the few exceptions where you really do need it. I would rather have 2,700 required and have some exceptions that, because especially if you're doing this for remodels where you need a building permit, then you certainly, in part of that planning process, you could give exceptions to ones that can be of 2,700. But in my lights that I have in my backyard, they could be 2,700, no problem. There's no safety issue. So, and I suspect that most people are in the same boat as that. So I would hate to require 4,000 just for the exceptions. I think that I'd rather start low with and require exceptions. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
We're going to go for a second round, it looks like. Commissioner Liu?
I was going to ask a somewhat rhetorical question about how staff wants us to move forward. I want to move the ball forward, and I really like Commissioner Chang's points about preventing weird edge cases by applying this to new buildings and substantial remodels. And I also wonder whether there's consensus here about maybe making some light revisions based on our comments and applying this to the foothills and baylands kind of more quickly. Like, do we see that as kind of the way to move forward here? Like limit the applicability to new construction and remodels and limit the applicability to limit the applicability to baylands and foothills?
I certainly like this suggestion. I would love to hear from others. So let's see what Commissioner Heckman has to say and whether we think that we could, as a commission, get far enough on enough things to feel comfortable to do what Commissioner Liu suggested. So let's see what we all think of that. Commissioner Heckman?
Thank you. So I guess I'll start with that. I think it could be a good way forward to sort of break it into those two pieces. I'm sort of wondering, even if we did that, are we really going to be able to, come to a consensus tonight on something that can move forward to council, or are we still going to have enough open issues? Because I think this is more important in those areas which are already lower light because they're lower density and as somebody pointed out, more sensitive receptors, animals in those areas. But I'm not sure that would allow us to move forward with a motion tonight any more than sort of the path we've been on, which I think has been really productive in talking about, well, if we get our applicability and exceptions right, maybe we can get a level of comfort. So with that in mind, I did want to acknowledge Commissioner Liu pointed out that the streetlights are not covered by this ordinance, and those will continue even if we had no housing lights. Those would continue to provide some illumination on the street. But I can tell you, at least in our neighborhood, where we have a lot of very large street trees that extend into the street, we have a lot of dark spots where that light doesn't reach. And in those situations, then the neighbor's house light helps. But it's not, you're right, it's not pitch black. One thought I had is, I guess one thing I'd like to see is on this curfew, an exemption for residential entry doors. And I don't want to say, single family home because it applies equally to multifamily development. And again, those are typically not your worst offender spotlights. They're, usually tastefully done because you don't want to blind people as they're stepping up to your door. And I thought about, do we just say front door? But then I thought there are, a lot of people who have a front door for guests basically, and they come in from the side door, right? When they're, park their car in the detached garage. And so I don't want necessarily that area to be totally dark. So I think, but between this limitation to new construction or substantial remodel and a curfew exemption for these porch, basically what I've been calling porch lights, I'm mostly comfortable. On the Kelvin issue, I guess. I'm hearing my commissioners that don't seem to have the same concern about keeping it at 4,000 other than, in special circumstances. And it's occurring to me that I really don't know what I'm talking about. I really have, like, if you showed me two lights, I would only know that one was 4 and the other 3 because the 3 was not as bright as the 4, right? And so is there some? So
can I just interject here?
Yeah.
We actually have somebody who's an expert in the room. It happens to be a member of the public, but they actually have and so I might suggest that we rely on that expertise. And again, we don't want to confuse brightness.
Yeah.
It's the light color, like how blue or yellow versus bright.
So
Yeah, it's not it's different than just brightness. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
Right.
Yeah, it
It's
is
more
different
than
than
that, too.
brightness, and that's important to know. When LEDs started, the energy consumption was to achieve the energy consumption that they were trying to get to, they had to have very high Kelvin levels, 5,000, 6,000 and more. The technology did not exist to go with the energy savings and also lower Kelvin levels. That development, the lighting industry has been developing fast, and today 2700 is very accessible. For a while, you couldn't get those. So everybody said, oh, let's do 3,000 or 4,000. Today, you can get the 2700, and more are coming at 2400. And the reason is that the level of Kelvin reflects the blue light component, which is very harmful to people and to everything that's alive. So the intent of the industry is actually moving towards lower Kelvin, while at the same time balancing the energy consumption of these lights, because you don't want to go back to what we used to have, which is a lot of energy consumption. In terms of what you see, there's not a lot of difference. The difference is visible to some insects and birds, and they're attracted to the blue light. And so if that's kind of like where we are, they'll come to downtown instead of the Baylands if the Baylands are dark and the downtown has a lot of light in it. But they perceive it. We barely perceive it. And people will see the risks around them as well, and it's kind of misleading our eyes. We feel that the light is brighter, but we actually don't distinguish things better with 3,000 or 27. But the impact of the blue light on our health and the health of the ecosystem is important. I don't know whether that completely answers the question, but really it's a matter of technology that has been changing. And some legacy, 4,000, we need that. We don't. And so the experts that we talk to from the Dark Sky Association, they recommend 2,400. It's difficult to get to 2,400 because it's hard to get the fixtures. They're not there yet. They will be, but they're not there yet. 2,700 today is easy. That's why we recommended 2,700. Anyway, if you have questions, I can
Thank you.
try.
I've also got a comment from Commissioner Aiken.
Yeah, I wanted to caution us against going too deeply down this particular rat hole because there's a lot of physics and psychology of color perception involved, as well as the technology of the lamps. And I know enough to know that we can't make this decision trivially tonight. The color temperature is how close a lamp is to an idealized physical radiator. So that is not the same as the color of the light or how you perceive colors that are illuminated by this light. That's generally done in the industry today by a thing called the color rendering index. But the main point I just wanted to make is that it is far more complicated than we can boil down into a single number. As far as the illuminators themselves, if what we're really doing is optimizing for lowest impact on the surrounding wildlife and plant life, you might go for why stop at 2,700? Why not go to 2,400? Why not go to 2,200? Why not go to night vision red, which is what you have to use when you really need to be able to see something in low light situations? Or ultimately, the obvious answer is don't have any outdoor lights. The reason you have all this other stuff is because there are other purposes that have to be balanced with the impact on the surrounding world. And that's what we're trying to do here. It's not an easy question to answer. And the only thing we could do tonight is make a very coarse approximation to what an adequate solution might be. So let's not fixate too much on that.
Okay, so we have a follow-on question for Commissioner Rechtolf of the.
I wasn't done.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So that was an answer to my question.
Okay.
That again, I'm trying to get comfortable with this 3,000 versus 4,000, and now I've heard Ms. Kleinfelder Klein House, sorry, say it's really, really barely perceptible. And I appreciate your expertise and I'm not questioning it. So I guess I'm willing to support the 3,000. But when we get around to a motion, which I hope we do, I'd like somehow to include in that motion that I think if our police department thinks that that's not appropriate, then they need to explain to the city council why. Because, they're not here tonight to inform us, and maybe they're just thinking brighter is safer, right? Without really even themselves having a better understanding than I do of the difference. So that's how I'd kind of like to package that. But I think I'm comfortable with, and staff, of course, has vetted this and decided that 3,000 is an appropriate level. So I think I'm comfortable with that now.
Vice Chair Rectal.
Shawnee had a follow-up question, and Commissioner Aiken may want to chime in too. So when we heard the water treatment plant, one of the suggestions was to go to a lower temperature light there. And the staff said, no, they didn't want that for safety reasons. In your opinion, could they got the same safety with a lower temperature, but then a brighter light at a lower temperature? Would that been able to meet their safety needs, or?
It's really hard to balance all that, like Commissioner Akin explained. They were really looking at guidelines for indoor lighting for industrial facilities when they recommended that 4,000 or more. I think overall we would prefer the 2,700, or even 3,000. I think they ended up with 4, but I'm not sure I remember correctly. But they also have that only for short periods of time, and it's relatively dim. So balancing all of that is difficult. The real difference between 27 and 3,000 Kelvin or more is how much blue light is included. We don't perceive that. Some creatures do, like I said, birds and bugs do. But we don't really see how much blue light there is. The impact is on our sleep, on our health, on children's health. A lot of impacts are related to how much blue light is included in the spectrum of the fixture that you're using. Outdoor lighting and the blue light have been connected to various health issues in people. It's hard to show with outdoor light complete linkage, right? Because it's outdoors. But the studies that have been done on large populations of nurses and people who work at night in shifts and all that show there is a risk to that light. So, if you do 3,000, you do 3,000.
Short answer is that it's not an easy answer.
Definitely not.
Okay.
Thank you.
27 is better for creatures and for people.
Yeah.
Overall.
I want to support 2,700 if possible, but if there is a legitimate safety issue, I'm concerned about that. But I wonder if there's more than one dimension here, and could you go to 2,700 and have brighter and still be able to achieve the safeness? And I don't think we have the ability to say that tonight.
So I do like Commissioner Heckman's kind of solution to whatever number we arrive upon, to ask for some, to kind of flag that for city council. Me personally on the lumens, having just remodeled, I can see the difference barely for 2,700 versus 3,000, but I'm happy to go with 2,700 if I think that there's a material impact for outdoor, in combination with limiting the applicability of this to major remodels, so that if there really is or major remodels and new construction, so that there really is a need, that we can address that. I did have a question for staff. I somehow remember reading that low voltage lighting is an exception. Is that correct?
That's correct. For the, we have listed here.
Under exceptions?
Under exceptions, under shielding section.
Okay.
So that includes 10 watt or 150 lumens.
And then is low voltage light, like as written, was the curfew intended to address low voltage lighting too? Like pathway lights
That wasn't intended, but that can be also added as well.
as
'cause
an
that
exception?
As an exception.
Okay, because I mean, I'm also listening to what my colleagues are saying about, street lights are great, but there definitely are dark spots, and there's reasons why we have pathway lighting. But that's also low voltage and tends to, if properly shielded, might be okay. So I would like to see an exception there potentially for low voltage lighting. We have it for solar lighting, but it actually goes up to 20, something higher than what would be considered low voltage. So if we're accepting that, it seems to me that we should also accept like the low voltage pathway lighting that is so common that I know I use. And it wouldn't really be sufficient on timer. I kind of need to see it before I am walking in it. All right. Other comments, and I'm trying to figure out how to best proceed here with a motion that, we could either send you guys off and then I would, and then to come back again, in which case I would ask staff where they think they need clarification from the commission, or we could attempt to make a motion, but I'm not I'm not ready to do that, and I can't think of what it would be. If anybody can, yeah. So I'd like colleagues. What do you think? I've got Commissioner Aiken here.
Yeah, we've talked about a lot of things here, and some of them have been very detail oriented. And I'm curious to know how much staff has captured. So perhaps it would certainly help me. Perhaps it would help others if we know what you're going to investigate for the version that you intend to take to council. If enough of those are covered, and if we're happy with a compromise on applicability, then we may be able to move forward.
So Commissioner Aiken, are you suggesting that staff kind of summarize for us what they've managed to capture?
I think that's what I'd like to hear. Is that
let's go.
of interest?
Let's do that. I think that might be the best way to proceed, regardless of the ultimate path we take.
Okay, I'll try to go through my notes. So I think the clarification, I think the direction from the planning, the commission on applicability would be helpful, whether there's a modification recommended in applicability section. And I believe there was some clarification needed for the lighting standards under shielding. That's 1D on packet page 22. Related to the 3 feet at public right-of-way that was initially requested, some modifications or potentially further discussion. And there were some concerns related to the rooftop lighting for outdoor dining uses. So that's something that staff can definitely follow up on. And let's see. So the lighting curfew, there was a lot of discussion related to whether that should be accepted. There should be some exception for the porch lighting, so that direction would be definitely helpful as well.
Just to clarify, I think there was, some really good feedback there. It wasn't just porches; it's like entrance door lighting.
Okay, yeah. So that we can follow up, and then also staff will follow up on the outdoor solar powered pathway lights, whether that should actually expand to other sources. And the correction will be made to the title of the gasoline service station lighting to include the EV charging stations as well. And staff will follow up on the current lighting level on the gas stations to compare with the proposed standards. The lighting near streams will be referenced to the news, the section that the staff is working on to update. And the prohibited lighting section, the subjective language, staff can actually remove that provision or also try to come up with some other objective standard, but that can be. I think those are all of my notes at this moment. If there's anything else to add.
I'll chime in with a few that I captured. So I think there was one thing about illuminating street numbers on a building facade and eliminating the part about on a building facade. And then we didn't discuss it as a commission, but I thought of a potential solution to the issue. So on the gasoline service lighting, there was a lot of discussion about sort of outdoor uses. And the staff's answer was that most of that would be just covered by our regular business hours. And so the exception to that rule is any outdoor business. So I can't think of everything possible that might be, but a cup is required for a business to operate beyond or within the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. window. And so my suggestion to that would be that we would base the timing of this gasoline service station lighting for any businesses that have outdoor lighting outdoor operating hours and outdoor lighting to tie it to their cup. So if they've got a cup to operate to midnight, which presumably, I guess, like a drive-through does, then they should still be allowed to have their outdoor lighting that they could have at 10 p.m. They can still have it at midnight as well. So I think that's the principle that we were all trying to get at. And if you could base it off of a cup for operating hours, then that might solve that problem. Director Late.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, commissioners. And to staff who's, working on this, trying to respond to all the questions. I will say that I do appreciate the interest to try to move something forward and advance this particular ordinance. In addition to Ms. Chaw's, summary, I had some other notes that I've taken that I think probably require a little bit more vetting. And I'm saying this, on one hand, I do want to move things forward to get them, so we can take on the council priorities and move on to our next items. But there's a lot here that I feel like has been raised, and it would probably benefit from another pass with staff looking at the comments that we've received and how we might reflect that in an ordinance. I think the commission has identified a lot of interesting sort of use cases and scenarios that I think we just need to vet through a little bit more carefully. In the area that I feel would be helpful to receive feedback from the commission on is this notion of, I think we're clear based on the conversation. I would move toward an applicability of substantial remodels and new construction as being the area where we would enforce these standards. But I had also heard some comments about geographically in the city, is there a priority for the foothills and baylands and less so for the flats? And then we heard from public comment that the flats is an area that is important as well, because that could cause the wildlife to come toward the flats and away from the areas that it might otherwise want to be in, baylands and foothills. So hearing from the commission some kind of direction as to that type of applicability, because right now we're approaching this as a citywide ordinance. If the commission had some perspective on that, either to proceed on a citywide approach as is before you, or if you think that we should be separating this into these sort of light sensitive areas, that's a question I think would be helpful for us to get some feedback on.
Thank you, Director Late. So I think what we're hearing from staff is, and thank you so much, Ms. Chaw, for kind of going down that laundry list, it does seem to us that I'm not seeing, my colleagues' lights light up here. So it sounds like you captured the bulk of them, and it sounds like Director Late captured some more. So that's fantastic. It should be a really good starting point for you guys to make some changes and then come back to us hopefully pretty rapidly with the refinements. And then that now, if that is the direction that we're proceeding, which is not to recommend this to council just yet, we do need to provide staff some direction on two pieces that Director Late highlighted. The first is, I read the room, and I think that the commissioners are in agreement that the applicability should be limited to new construction and major remodels. And I would like to just sort of get a show of hands if you disagree with that and would like to discuss that further.
Just to confirm, that's also includes the curfew. So the curfew would be applicable to.
Correct. I think for everything, for the whole. Sorry,
no, I don't, the way the ordinance is written, I don't think that's right. The curfew applies tomorrow if it's adopted today. But in terms of installing new lights, so your existing lights are grandfathered basically, but they still have to be turned off at 10. So curfew is outside of the applicability.
Curfew is outside of the applicability, but curfew is something that staff highlighted that they're going to look at. Yes. Okay. So with respect to the applicability question specifically, that was the consensus that I seemed to get. And so if any commissioner disagrees with that applicability of limiting it to major remodels and things that require a permit, could you please light it up? Okay, great. And then, so I'm not seeing any disagreement on that. So staff, you have the direction there. The other piece that Director Late wanted us to all chime in on is whether we want to continue with a citywide ordinance as staff has drafted with us, or whether we think it's important to have sort of a areas of emphasis. So that's where I'd love to see people light it up. And Commissioner Rectal, was that where your comment was?
I wanted to talk about the curfew, but.
Okay, let's talk about the curfew after we talk about, let's talk about the curfew afterwards, and remind me if I forget. So Commissioner Aikman and then Commissioner Peckman.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to see this continue to be applied citywide. And the reasons are it more faithfully follows the goal that we're trying to achieve. But also, now that we've limited applicability to remodels and new construction, we'll be able to run a few projects incrementally and see how well they work out. And then if we run into issues, we can modify the ordinance. That'll be a lot easier if the flats are included in this ordinance, because that's where most of the projects will be. So that's my call.
Thank you. Commissioner Heckman?
Yeah, so I think that the idea of splitting this up a little bit earlier in the evening, when we were thinking maybe we're going to try to move something forward tonight, and that was something we could bite off. But I agree with Ms. Chaw's kind of listing and Director Late's additional items of things that are going to work out, come back to us. I think we can cover the whole thing, and I think the benefits are as Commissioner Aiken described. So I don't think we need to split that out.
Fantastic. I'm going to read the room again. I'm seeing lots of nods and agreement with what Commissioner Aiken said, and nobody's lighting things up to tell me otherwise. So that's the direction that we would like to continue with a citywide ordinance. Commissioner Liu?
I agree that we should continue with the citywide ordinance. If there's some scientific basis that we should be more strict in the Baylands or foothills, I'd also be open to that. But yeah, with the applicability standards, I'm personally fine with applying at least the current kind of scope and discussion to the whole city.
Okay, thank you. So now to Vice Chair Rectal, who wanted to talk about the curfew.
Yeah, I like the concept of a curfew. I'm worried about the applicability, how easy it's going to be for the homeowner to install something that knows the time of day. So I think we want to examine that. But I think we can get by if we have timers for anything that's overnight. I think that really should mitigate a lot. And is that a better solution, is to have anything that's on overnight be on a timer with a very short time. Is that a more feasible way of?
Do you mean motion sensor rather than timer?
Sorry, a motion sensor with a timer, right? So it goes on and does not stay on for 10 minutes, it stays on for 2 minutes. Yeah, something like that.
Right, but it would still mean that we can't have a curfew that's immediately applicable, because without changing out the light fixture, that wouldn't be a possibility. So it sounds like we would want to limit the applicability of the curfew as well. Is that correct?
I think that's more feasible.
Yes, I think so too. But I just wanted to understand your comment.
Yeah, that's my comment, is that I'm more, like I said, if I could wave a magic wand and have the curfew, but I don't think it's feasible. I'm worried that's feasible. That's what staff will tell us.
I think staff already commented on that. They didn't really know, and so they can investigate that more.
Yeah, investigate, but I'm not convinced that a curfew with a time of day is actually what we want. That they can investigate.
Okay, so does staff need a motion from us? I think you probably do, right? Oh, yes, Mr. Rick.
Yeah, I just had a point of clarification. So when the curfew discussion came up sort of in this earlier discussion, there was questions about like the new or existing buildings. Is there kind of clarification in like how that's addressed? Is it the same as the general applicability? Is that kind of the consensus, or is it something different in terms of, because currently as written, it says to all new and existing buildings. Is that clear direction from the?
No, I think what
Commission
we,
on-
I think, thank you for the clarifying question. I'm going to play back what I've heard from my colleagues. And again, just maybe Commissioner Heckman actually wants to say something about this. So do you want to go ahead?
Well, no, I'm hoping I was going to say the same thing you are. I think where we've evolved is the applicability is going to be new or substantially remodeled buildings,
Okay.
but not existing, right? And that
For the curfew also.
for the curfew,
Okay.
right?
We don't
So-
think that a curfew, unless you tell us that the technology exists out there, we think that a curfew would be very difficult for homeowners to enact, because unless they can put their lights on timer, like that their fixtures are able to know what time it is, that it would require the installation of a new light fixture, which is, yeah, and that's not something that we want to be in the position of having to enforce.
So just to clarify further, sorry. So if the staff cannot find that the technology is readily available and easy to implement, that sentence in the first sentence under the lighting control section 4A will be removed. Would that basically suffice?
I think it's the reverse of what you just said.
Yeah.
Our belief is that the technology is not readily available or without a homeowner incurring a substantial inconvenience or cost. So unless you tell us there's a really easy way for a homeowner to enact a curfew, we would like that to strike that sentence.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Great. That's sufficient direction for us to bring it back for the consideration. And then,
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Commissioner Liu?
And I think even in that case, for single family homes, we should also consider a phase-in period for multifamily, or some way of defining like director discretion, or like slightly extended timelines for cases like mine. And I imagine cases for many other condos and apartments, which might not be able to immediately afford like an expensive rewiring.
The direction we're going, though, is that your building and those that you just described, the curfew won't apply to them until there's a substantial remodel. You're exempt until there's a substantial remodel.
Okay. I was also a little bit confused by the comment earlier saying that if there was a way to upgrade the fixtures easily, then maybe that's like, we seem to be saying that we should have 4A apply to existing buildings. And so I realized that we were potentially
No, I think
opening that
that makes
door. So I
sense.
also wanted to clarify that, like, we should still be mindful and find a reasonable way forward on.
So I think there might be, I think Commissioner Liu is bringing up a blanket point, which is if there is anything in the ordinance that then staff decides, given all our feedback, makes sense to apply universally to everybody, then in that situation, there should be some sort of time frame or guideline as to, what's the grace period for this and when must it be enacted.
Okay, great. That's helpful.
Okay.
And
Go ahead.
sorry,
Go ahead.
not to just, while we have this opportunity, I think it's helpful so we can kind of bring back something. And there's just one other area that I felt like was discussed that I'm not sure if there is sort of, I don't know, consensus direction on kind of where to go with it. And that's outdoor lighting for commercial properties that aren't, public facilities or so essentially outdoor lighting for general safety purposes. I was wondering if there's any.
Can you put up that slide? Because there was a carve out, I remember. Is this the one that you're referring to?
So there is the carve out for public facilities or, city operations, but one thing that we haven't sort of proposed, but it seems like has come up is for private commercial enterprises. So we've talked about, the service stations in that narrow context, but let's say, a business that's operating after dark that has a parking lot, for example, that has lighting. I was just wondering if there's any sort of thoughts or direction for when we bring this back related to that context. So like, for example, maybe a safety exception for some commercial operations of private businesses.
I didn't know if anybody has, Commissioner Heckman has his light up. Oh, goes light. Okay. And then Commissioner Liu?
I would need to think about and catch up on the exact wording of how this would work for private parking lots. I would generally suspect that kind of sweeping lighting for public parking lots would fall for existing public parking lots be covered by the same applicability standards, but we would want to, like those could be quite wide and sweeping in terms of their light. And so we would want to limit that. My main thought though was on businesses with like substantial patios or that are entirely outdoors, things like the Rose and Crown, things like Backyard Brew, so on. There are a bunch of examples. And in those cases, I would hope that we tie similar standards to our permanent parklet program. I expect in our permanent parklet program, we would have some flexibility where within the parklet, like there could actually, like the owner could have a little bit of discretion on the atmosphere they want to create or how they kind of light their space. And I would expect that to apply as well to patios, outdoor dining, things like that.
I'm not sure we gave you what you wanted, but I had suggested that you could rely on, I think, so what I'm hearing from my colleagues is that our concern is about where the core business the core business needs to take place outdoors, in which case, hopefully hopefully that the lighting would also be governed by the cup and hours of operation.
Okay, great, thanks. I think that's sufficient kind of based on the past discussion, but just wanted to make sure I was kind of capturing all of that in terms of, other sort of conditions that are safety related. So we can bring something back based on the discussion this evening after having more time to discuss it internally.
Okay, and then can somebody tell me if we need a motion on this? I don't think so. Okay, nobody's popping up, so we're gonna.
But before we do,
Yeah,
I did have one more clarification I think we need to provide the staff.
Please go ahead.
And that's on the Kelvins. So I've heard a couple of the chair and vice chair, I think, reference the 2,700. I referenced the 3. And I think we should get some consensus so that when we get a draft ordinance come back, it'll have either it does currently 3 or 2,700. I will say that I can go either way. But what I'd like, since this is coming back, I would like staff to invite our safety personnel to come explain to us why they're concerned about whatever number, 27 or 3, anything less than 4. Since we have that opportunity, since we're going to see it again. And so I'll support whatever majority of the rest of the commission goes in terms of staff putting a number in to bring it back to us.
Great.
Okay.
And I think we do need a motion to continue to a date uncertain.
I think is that what Mr. Yang is popping up for? Oh, you're on mute, Mr. Yang.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Okay, great. So it sounds like what Commissioner Heckman is suggesting to make staff's life easier is if we could give them some direction on like the number that we want. So should we just go down the line and say what that is? And then regardless of what number that is, we would like to hear from the public safety folks or whoever was objecting to 2,700. And then perhaps if you have any science on, if the public safety folks have any science, because we got the science on why the 2,700. So now we'd like to hear the science on why something higher than 2,700. Okay, and then Commissioner Templeton.
I like your suggestion. I would adjust it to say what our principles are instead of the numbers, because we aren't, as you mentioned, we aren't the experts on those numbers. So what if we said we want to do the thing that is, a good balance between safety and, not harming the animals or whatever.
Okay, great suggestion. All right, so Commissioner Templeton, do you want to start?
Yes, I'd like to have the best balance between safety and not harming the animals. So thank you.
And then let's just go down the line, Commissioner Heckman.
The number?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the principle behind it.
Well, so the number is I'm supportive of either 27 or 3,000 being in the draft. And again, what I'm looking for is the lowest light that is safe for humans in the vicinity.
Commissioner, Vice Chair Rectal.
I'd say 2,700, unless we can be shown that there's some safety issues. And then if so, can we have time durations short enough to minimize the effect of that higher temperature?
Great. I would say the same thing as Commissioner Rectal. Commissioner Aiken?
That's tough. I have to put on my engineer's hat. There are a lot of other issues that may come into play that make it complex. But as I said earlier, the choice of color temperature is not going to make or break this for me. So, yeah, I think the correct approach is as Vice Chair Rectal described.
Commissioner Liu?
Yeah, I'm also with Commissioner Aiken. I would be happy to see 2,700, but would be flexible depending on what city staff say about safety or other kind of pragmatic concerns.
Okay, thank you all. Let's see if we can generate a motion to get this off our plates and move on to the next item. Would anybody like to hazard a try? Commissioner Heckman.
I think it's pretty simple, right? I move we continue item 4A, 2A, to a date uncertain, so that the staff can have time to investigate and revise the draft ordinance and bring it back to us with an invitation to our safety personnel to speak to us on their views on the Kelvin issue.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, Ms. Dow, could you please take the vote?
Commissioner Aiken,
Yes.
Chair Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Vice Chair Rectal,
Yes.
Commissioner Templeton,
Yes.
motion carries 6-0.
Okay, so we finished that item. I have that it is 8:13 on my watch. We will take a 7-minute break and then come back to discuss bird safety. Thank you. Am I okay yet? Okay, here we are. We are all back. So welcome back. We're going to resume and march along on our agenda. So the next item that we are going to address now is item 2B, which addresses, let me see, adding a new section 18.40.280, bird-friendly design. And again, at this time, I'd like to take additional public comment from anybody who did not comment at our last meeting on this item. Ms. Dow, are there any speaker cards or raised hands?
No, I have no request to speak.
Okay, great then. So we're going to move forward now with clarifying questions from commissioners. So light them up. Okay, first we have Commissioner Aiken, then Commissioner Heckman.
Thank you, Chair. Just one easy one this time. I was curious about the 24 square foot limit for transparent fenestration. Just curious as to how that was arrived at.
So we've looked at different city ordinances, and one of them was San Francisco regulations, and they do have those regulations. Basically, they have exemptions for their location-based requirements, and part of that exemption is that if any of the facade has more than 50% of glazing, then they do require the windows or glazing to have those bird safe treated glasses, but only to those that are 24 square feet or larger. And in addition to looking at that, we've also looked at some of the common sizes of the windows, and staff found that majority of it is smaller than 24 square feet, that it might mitigate some of the concerns with the single family homes.
Okay, thank you. And that raises another question for me. In one of the presentation slides, you had an accordion fold wall illustrated, and if you mentioned it last time, I've forgotten. Why was that illustrated particularly?
So that was to represent, to sort of like provide visual for some examples of potentially, because the sliding door seems to be large, but those sliding doors are broken into two. So I'll share that particular image. Sorry. Share the screen. So as you can see, this is a sort of a newer accordion doors. These are, so the requirement, the standard says that it has to be 24 square feet or larger, and it has to be unbroken, meaning that we will be looking at this one portion as one, instead of looking at entire accordion door together. So for these, the regular sliding doors, when the staff looked at it, it's usually typically like 20 square feet. So it'll be under 24 as well. So that was the reason why we were.
Thank you. But one other question I had about that was, is it an issue that when they're all the way open, that you have a free path for a bird to fly through?
That is a concern. We do have, let me quickly look at the bird hazard installation defined, that basically is talking about sort of the feature-based elements like balconies with glass railing, and then this outdoor staircases with glass railing or things like that, so that we can definitely limit those as well. If it's completely open, that might be another case, but so that particular provision is there to kind of prevent those kind of incidents.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Commissioner Heckman?
Thank you. Just a question on stakeholder engagement, which is packet page 18. You mentioned in the staff report, you've engaged with Audubon Society and Sierra Club, had a couple of study sessions, but I was the burdens of this ordinance are going to largely fall on the development community, home builders, commercial building builders. And so I wanted to hear what outreach you did and engagement with the development community that is going to foot the bill for this.
We haven't had a specific meetings targeted to the development community, but we have conducted 2 study sessions with Architectural Review Board, and that was widely advertised with whatever is required by the code. And then, and also in addition to that, while researching, staff had reached out to several architects in the local community to find out some information related to some strategies and their experience with bird safe glass and design. So we have spoken to, I believe, we have reached out to about 5 different individual architects, and we've received response from 2 out of 5, and received some information related to the cost and some additional information related to suppliers and things like that.
Great. I was hoping you had taken those kinds of steps, and I'm glad to hear you did. I shouldn't be surprised that you did. Thanks.
Commissioner Liu?
Just to kind of ask for some more color about that, can you give an intuition on the dollar costs for a window or maybe a larger project and how that actually translates?
So the cost information, staff tried to find it really hard. So as part of the research to find some cost information, it was very difficult to get that dollar amount or percentage even from architects because those are not something that they read. I guess it's not something readily available. You would have to research into it, get the calculations done. So they were not able to provide. We've reached out to retailers who have also said it's difficult to do that. But we found some research from 2011, which is a little bit old. So it might be not as significant, but according to that research, this is the American Bird Conservancy report, which included research into costs from different cities, basically nationwide. And that basically said 2 to 10% of the cost, additional cost. But staff also spoke to our local expert. And she had mentioned that recently there's some data available that says that it's about maximum 1.5% increase. It wouldn't go above maybe 2%.
Got it. And I think that's useful because 2% is really could be really significant, for example, for a affordable housing project, funded by a 4% tax credit or something like that. So I'm glad that there's some flexibility for affordable housing projects. So the ordinance as written covers, I guess, more expensive, permanent etchings or other treatments of the glass. I know the Audubon Society, for example, sells decals that can be applied that are bird safe, that are presumably much less expensive than having finely etched glass. Was there any consideration of allowing non-permanent treatments in this ordinance?
So that was part of the discussion from ARB as well. So because of the cost burden to single-family homes or smaller scale development, that was brought up. That, and also one of the architects mentioned that the cost would be minimal if we were to allow like decals or stickers to the windows. The concern is that it can be also easily removed. So staff decided that maybe it might be okay if we provide multiple options, that the cost burden might be also might be mitigated, but the applicability basically is another thing that we have changed from the ARB version. It now includes only the applies to new constructions and substantial remodel within the bird sensitive area. And also, I mean, all of the single family homes or other types of the buildings would have to apply if their windows larger than 24 square feet, but that also mitigates a lot of, because most of the homes do not have those big windows. So it sort of mitigates with those requirements.
If
It's, yeah, go ahead.
if I may sort of add to that, so to the question of whether we considered alternate means including decals, so yeah, that was part of the discussion, and we ultimately decided not to include that because it is removable. So it seems like it may not kind of meet the effect of or the intent, but that is something that the PTC could consider in their recommendation if you would want to add that back in based on a cost concern as part of direction to staff.
And that can be easily done by changing the language under D1 by changing the permanent or
Could you
remove
just
that.
speak into the mic while you're saying that?
Oh,
Because you
sorry.
turned your head aside and I couldn't hear.
If the Planning and Transportation Commission would like to modify and allow that temporary or not temporary decals or stickers to be allowed for bird safety treatments, that can be easily done by modifying the language under D1C, where it says frit, ceramic ink, or other marker types must be obscured and permanent. We can just remove the permanent at the end.
Okay, thank you. I can take that up in discussion. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Templeton, or sorry, Commissioner Templeton. You are also a Ms. Templeton.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to say that there was a cost to not doing this. I have lived in homes and worked in buildings that do not have the bird safe glazing, and it's a lot. It's a lot of damaged birds. So I can say that there's probably justifiable reason to put these in here. So I'm glad about that. The question I had was, I thought I heard at the beginning of tonight that there was a person who was recommending against it. And I'm wondering if you guys if staff can remind me what the objections to this were. It sounded like they were referring to last time. I just want to make sure I'm clear about what we're talking about.
Staff is not aware of anybody objecting this particular ordinance or
Are you speaking to the comments at the beginning of the
Yes.
meeting? Okay, so I think it was about sort of not making a recommendation to the council yet on this item, but potentially splitting kind of the lighting item separately. Is that what you're discussing, or am I not?
Well, I understood split it. I didn't understand what the reference to this item, like, I didn't know what the problem was.
Yeah, so the reference was from the public commenter who was saying that they thought that the dark skies ordinance was closer to being done than this one, that there's a lot of more nuance in this one. So maybe for this one, even though it wasn't so much that they didn't support the ordinance, they want a bird friendly design ordinance, but just that it's not ready for prime time. That was
okay, but we didn't get a lot of details on that, and we're going to be discussing that now. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay. Additional clarifying questions? I'm going to go because I don't see any lights. So I would like to, I also had a question about the cost of doing this. And so Ms. Shaw, you had mentioned that, you consulted our local experts. So if we could just get a little bit more detail from our local expert and ask our local expert to talk about what data there is about the cost that's different from what staff has found.
Okay, so what I know is that for homes, they're only custom providers. So for homes, to retrofit glass can be very, very costly. And so the solutions for homes really should look at the design, as well as potentially if the design cannot mitigate the problem, then you might want to go into asking them to do some additional retrofitting of the glass. But generally, it's expensive. For for mixed use and for offices, there are many solutions, and both in terms of the design itself or in terms of using retrofitted glass, like with some kind of lines or dots or stuff like that. The projects I've worked with companies, they don't like to disclose. I know one for sure, and that was a few years ago, and it was Intuit over at the end of San Antonio. And their building was $20 million, and the cost of the retrofit, and they have lines, and they actually are really nice. It's beautiful. But anyway, that was $200,000 for the retrofit. And that is a local company that was willing to disclose how much it cost them to do that. It's a large building and it's all glass. And that is percent not of the entire building, but core and shell, meaning only the envelope. It doesn't include everything that adds cost to the building later, like air conditioning and carpets and all that. So the envelope, that was $20 million. And out of that, 200,000 was the bird safe design. But for homes, again, really the emphasis should be on not needing to retrofit the glass. So don't create those kind of hazardous situations. And for offices there's so many solutions. All the big companies around here are implementing it. Anything from Facebook in Menlo Park, Google, Microsoft, Intuit, all of them. And for mixed use, also in North Bay Shore and other places, the solutions are there.
Thank you. Okay, so my clarifying that was very helpful. I think that clarification about like the 20 million external envelope cost and then the retrofitting being 200,000, that's at least one data point that does at least one data point to support that general data point of up to 2%. But it sounds like it's not necessarily up to 2% of the entire building. It may be up to 2% of just the external envelope of the building. Okay, I had a question about the staff report. So on page, oh goodness, I'm looking at my old staff report. So minus 121, page 17. Page 17 at the top. There looks like there's a typo. And so I was just wondering what staff was trying to say at the beginning of the first paragraph. So it says the definition of bird sensitive area was simplified to include a specific geographic areas east of Highway 101 and west of Foothill Expressway since the 300-foot buffer period. So was that just are we just supposed to strike since the 300-foot buffer?
Yes, so basically sorry about that. Staff was trying to explain that the previous version basically showed, the map showed that majority of the Foothill and Baylands area, which is east of 101, west of Foothill Expressway. With the buffer study, majority of the area included those areas, so that staff decided to just include, instead of having sort of like smaller areas not included, we've decided to include that portion, those two areas included in the bird safe completely.
Okay, thank you. Okay, my next clarifying question is regarding Okay, I think this may have already been answered, but my question is regarding the third bullet on the same page, so page 17, where it talks about a threat factor of 15 or below. And so my question to staff was, are those materials readily available at that low of a threat factor?
So staff's decision to kind of have three options available was to provide some flexibility in design. So the first two options are there for majority of the buildings. The threat factor is very like sort of a very technical that we don't anticipate some of the smaller development or single-family homes to use it. Most likely, some innovative design and architectural design may need some additional options, so we wanted to provide that additional option. Threat factor 15 is basically similar to what we're asking for with the fenestration. So if you were to kind of look at the materials for threat factor 15, those are similar to the staff recommendation on the fritted glasses.
So my question is because I saw some other public comment, and I can't remember what that was, about threat factor 20 or 25. So I was wondering if we could ask sort of our local expert again about sort of the availability of threat factor 15 material, because I want to, if we're really trying to include it, I wanted to see, is it readily available? So could I ask?
Yeah, and then I'll just supplement it before Shawnee to supplement that information. The threat factor is something that it's a calculations of all of the materials. So I think you just have to go through the materials to make sure that what number of threat factor that particular material poses. So
so is it an average you're saying over the square footage, or is it like if I have a piece of glass? I thought that my understanding was that if I had a piece of glass, that piece of glass has a specific threat factor rating. So my question is, can you buy threat factor 15 glass, given that I saw in some of the other public comments something about either, or maybe it was even in the model ordinance about, a different number?
I believe that is possible. When staff was researching this information, staff basically heavily based on the American Bird Conservancy website, where they had some threat factor materials database with threat factor information. So staff thought that might be something that anyone can reference and include or consider different materials from that database. And also the US, the LEED has a certain way of calculating the threat factor of any materials as well. And they usually request the form to be submitted to confirm that threat factor. So there is a way of evaluating threat factor of any materials.
Okay, so I'm looking at packet page 23. Packet page 23, where it's the model ordinance. And the model ordinance with respect to little Roman numeral 7, number 1, the American Bird Conservancy model ordinance suggests anything with a threat factor rating of 30, and staff is saying 15. So my concern is that we're going above board here, and that like if the model warrant, so can I just ask Ms. Kleinhaus to opine on this? Because I think this is pretty important and maybe may require some more staff research. Yeah.
Thank you. So the American Bird Conservancy has a system where they fly birds in a tunnel, a dark tunnel. At the end, there's 2 pieces of glass. They see which one collides more on the retrofitted glass or a different kind of glass. And from that, they have a really complicated and incomprehensible calculation of a threat factor. The threat factor, they go up to 30, they say is okay. It's roughly like 30% of the birds that fly towards that glass will hit it. Not exactly, but roughly. So they recommend 30. And they have a table of a lot of materials that start with a wall, which is 1, because it's just a brick wall, two other kinds of materials that become more and more dangerous to birds, and they go towards above 30. We recommended 25 if you want to use that at all, with the exception of no UV, because UV only works in the tunnel and doesn't work outside of that tunnel. But the calculation that staff recommended is an average. And the lead number, I don't know, there's a lead calculation that you can use, looks at an average. And so what we've seen, and I showed it last time, I think, is some buildings that one side will be a brick wall, the other side is a complete glass, but they can overall do some kind of averaging that get them to 15, and it's still very dangerous to birds. And so we were hoping, and that's just one of the details, is why we asked you not to move this forward yet, because the 25, if you use that, there are a lot of different options. Some of them are very pretty. There are a lot of different options. The 15 allows some really dangerous as well as very strong. So it's an average.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kleinhaus. Okay, that helps. And then I think I had final clarifying question, which is on packet page packet page 19. I can't do the math anymore. It was packet page 140. So that would be 19. Attachment C. It refers to a model ordinance from the Santa Clara Audubon Society. I only saw a model ordinance from somebody else, the American. Yeah, it wasn't the Audubon Society. So I'm wondering, is that just a typo or did I miss a model ordinance? Right. Okay. So I see in the packet a model ordinance from American Bird Conservancy, but I don't see a model ordinance from Santa Clara Audubon Society.
So that should have said the American Bird
Okay, thank you.
Conservancy. We received it from Audubon Society.
Okay. So now on to Vice Chair Rechtel.
Yeah, can you bring up the presentation and go
Speak into your mic.
I'm sorry. Can you bring up the presentation, please? Go to slide 14. Okay. So what kind of threat factor would this design be?
This will be 15. According to staff research, the 2x2 was 15, but we can definitely come back with that information confirmed.
Okay, yeah, that'd be interesting to see compared to some of the other. So this could be achieved with a film, but we don't allow that film because you could remove that film. Is that the issue?
So that was a concern, because if it is a sticker or film that anybody can definitely remove easily, and it wouldn't comply with the standards, if so.
And even if it's not intentionally removed, if it started to come off or something, oh, sorry. Even if it wasn't intentionally removed, if it started to come off, it might present like an issue of, maintenance over time to maintain the deterrent.
Okay.
Okay.
But again, the commission could consider something different if that's the direction.
Yeah, but a film like that would be much less expensive, and I would like to, maybe you can investigate the pros and cons of that. It seems to me that if we can save people money, we should save people money if it protects the birds. But, Shawnee, do you want to express your opinion?
Film wears out. Usually they last 7 years or so, and then you have to replace it. So I think if you're going to use it for homes, but not for businesses, maybe, I don't know, maybe not even that. I mean, stuff is correct, and there is a clause that says that people can request an alternative that staff can approve if needed. But for mixed use and offices, I would.
Okay, that makes sense. For homes, that seems like a good option. Slide 13. The 40 feet, if I remember correctly, wasn't there different cities had different thresholds for what height we care about?
That's correct. Sorry, I'm going to
Could you pull up
share.
the slide, please?
Slide 13.
So that everybody knows what we're talking about.
So
There we go.
staff looked at other cities. I believe San Francisco and Cupertino has 60 feet, and their percentage is basically 90%, below 40 feet, up to 40 feet, and anything above 40 feet would be 95%. Staff looked at other examples like, so this is particularly from Cal Green standards. So they do have a voluntary program on bird safety. And so staff just basically borrowed that standard. It has, and also the 40 feet might be a little bit more feasible for Palo Alto, but staff understands that we have housing element and additional focus areas where we allow taller and denser development. So if commissioner thinks that this is a little bit too short, I mean the height is, then it can definitely be considered for 60 feet, which is what the Cupertino.
Yeah, I don't know the right answer, but this is something that I want you to scrub a little more. Is this 40-foot arbitrary, or is there some science based on? But
Staff felt a little bit better borrowing from Cal Green standards because it's a part of the building code, which means that they had gone through some research with the data backing up, but also that means that they're looking at California as a whole. So they're looking at the entire state. So there's always a way for commissioners to consider additional height on this, and Cupertino has 60 feet. San Francisco has also 60 feet, and I believe the local expert had recommended 60 feet as well. So this can be discussed and modified.
Shawnee can.
I've been working on this for about 30 years. So, I mean, wires, antennas, all these things, buildings too, but this is really, I'm considered an expert on this. So the reason why 60 feet in the nearby communities is that most of the collisions, not all obviously, but most of them occur at the height of the trees. And if you have trees that are taller than 40 feet, then you want to accommodate more than 40 feet because the birds, that's kind of where they fly in the city. Very tall buildings like skyscrapers capture or kill different kinds of birds that migrate very high at night. But most of the collisions occur at the heights of the trees. And we have redwoods and we're called Palo Alto. I mean, we need to be, 40 feet is just not right for this. So in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Can you go to packet page 46? Maybe bring it up on the screens.
I will have that up, but it might take a little bit longer then. So if you don't mind just starting the comment.
So, I mean, this map kind of scares me because it seems.
Is there a question here, Commissioner?
What?
Is there a question?
Oh,
So I wanted to,
just clarifying stuff?
Yeah, we're just clarifying
Oh,
questions
sorry,
quickly.
sorry, okay. We'll talk about this later then.
Okay, do you have other clarifying questions?
No.
Okay, I think that's it for clarifying questions. So now, if you would like to go with your comments, please go ahead, Vice Chair.
Okay. Yeah, so
Just want to keep us on.
I thought we were diving straight into it and realized we were clarifying. Yeah, so this really scares me. It seems like this is overly complicated. I see like Barron Creek, and Barron Creek is just a little trickle. And all these concrete creeks, I don't think have any more attraction to birds than nice clusters of tall trees, which are all over Palo Alto. With Palo Alto's canopy, I don't think there is anything much different between a concrete creek and just a regular street. So why is it so complicated? What, explain the genesis of this map.
So the 300 feet is usually the buffer distance that the urban planning uses for sensitive population. So that's the buffer distance we use for considering the bird population as a sensitive population. And using, so this is mainly based on San Francisco, who had adopted the bird sensitive or bird friendly ordinance back in 2011. They have conducted some research and found out that the large vegetated areas like parks and open space and water features like baylands or creeks can be where some areas where birds are attracted to stay or maybe stay while migrating. So we follow the same methodology and created bird sensitive area, buffering from open space and parks larger than 1 acre, and also any creeks or water features. But it's something that the commission can definitely discuss and modify as needed. Staff recommendation is, if anything to be modified, that we still consider baylands and foothills and potentially discuss and give us direction on the flatland portion.
Okay. So.
I don't see other lights, so I'm going to go. So in terms of my general comments, first of all, I think that staff, this is a commendable effort. I'm so glad to see that we are trying to do the right thing here. Before I heard the public comment, my reaction to this ordinance was that it wasn't quite ready for a couple of reasons. The ordinance itself is missing a whole bunch of definitions. And so there were quite a few terms as I was reading through it. I wasn't entirely, it was like, you could see that it was based off of the model ordinance, but it didn't grab the definition from the model ordinance. So I'm not going to point out all of those places, but there were some missing definitions. I'm also, I feel like it's both too stringent in some places and too lax in others. In other words, some of the ordinance I think might be, so I think there's a big applicability question here. I think that we may want to treat, because of the nature of the materials and how easy and hard it is for, say, homeowners to get materials, right? Like I recently went through a remodel. Nowhere did I see anything about bird safe windows being available for me to purchase versus a commercial building where they're buying, skyscraper glass that comes with all these like little lines and stuff. That's not something that I can buy as a homeowner. So I wonder about the applicability there, and that maybe what we need to do, that's like a segue into another aspect of applicability, which is this map that is currently up on the screen that Vice Chair Reckdahl referred to. That map terrifies me because I want an ordinance that is easy for people to understand when it is applicable to them. So if we say this applies to commercial, anybody who's building a commercial or mixed use building knows that they're building a commercial or mixed use building. Now, if I'm a resident doing a remodel or new construction on my house, and I look at this map, like I might not realize that I'm in one of these zones, and I think that I can do something when I can't do something, and it's like everywhere. On the other hand, if we simplify it dramatically and we say, okay, it's east of 101 and west of Foothills, again, I think that becomes really obvious to residents. And so maybe how we are defining applicability could be simplified to kind of get more, oomph, that's also easily save more birds in a more easily understandable way. And then also, when I look at, I'm not entirely sure that 101 should be the demarcation, particularly as I think about our housing element and where we're likely putting in a lot of very tall buildings. And we've talked about this in several other meetings when we talked about the housing element and upzoning and We have a lot of new buildings that are probably going to be pretty high going up on the west side of 101. And so we might need to make the bird safe area, a different street. Maybe it's not 101, it's something else, because the birds do fly across 101. So that's just food for thought also. And then finally, when I was looking at that 24 square foot area for a window, and as well as the accordion door I think about all the Eichlers in South Palo Alto. There's like huge windows in almost like all of those houses. It's 24 feet is it's 3 by 8 or 4 by 6. There are lots of houses in Palo Alto with windows that size. So I just am worried that we're I don't want people to be turned off by this ordinance. I don't think anybody wants birds smashing into their windows. That's traumatic. So I want to make it something that we can feel good about doing, but also make it something that is doable. So I think there's lots of little tweaks here and there, and I'll just leave it at that for my first round. Thanks. Okay, so we have Commissioner Heckman, and then Commissioner Aiken, and then Commissioner Liu.
So generally, I'm supportive of the direction this ordinance is going. I appreciate the work staff has done to consider a lot of sources in putting together that tries to be appropriate for Palo Alto. I do have a couple of concerns about the ordinance as currently written. And incidentally, I live in an Eichler. And one of the first things I did when I was reading the staff report is I went and measured my windows, which are big. They are under 24 square feet. I don't know if there are different Eichler designs that actually have larger windows, like where I have 2 big windows. Maybe they have 1 really big window. So that could be a problem, significant problem, because we get the occasional bird image on our Eichler glass. So we haven't had to, clean up any from the backyard yet. And I've lived there almost 30 years. But they do strike the window rarely, a couple times a year. The 2 concerns I have, first, we've got this new housing element, and we are trying to accommodate up to 6,000 new units of residential over the next now 6.5 years. And a lot of that is going to be, almost all of that is going to be dense development, some mixed use. And I'm concerned that these costs could be a constraint to new housing. Because 2% is, as these these are big buildings, they are expensive, and 2% of a big number is itself a big number, and so I'm concerned about that. And I wonder if in our dialogue we should be at least discussing exemptions for should we be talking about new or substantial rebuilt single-family homes, and what do we do about these larger mixed-use projects that we are expecting to come? So that's a big concern. A practical concern I have is really with the definition of bird-sensitive area. Parts A and B, east of 101, west of Foothill, I have an issue there. It's C, it's basically 300 feet, within 300 feet of a waterway or other open space of an acre or more. And I think that definition is too broad and really lacks context. Because when I think about 300 feet from a waterway, for example, I think about San Francisco Creek at Edgewood. So 300 feet captures the house that backs up to the creek. It crosses Edgewood. It includes, those houses are typically 100 feet deep. It includes the house across Edgewood, and then it goes into the backyard of the house that is fronting on Hamilton. And so while I understand the birds using that riparian corridor, I don't know that the bird flights 3 houses over are any different than mine, which is another 4 houses into the neighborhood. And the same is true of our parks, where 300 feet from our parks, you're probably at the 3rd house. And so, and what's interesting is when we were looking at this map, if you look at Edgewood at San Francisco Creek, it's not showing 300 feet. It's just showing the house on the creek side of Edgewood. So that's 100 or 120 feet. Because Edgewood, you can see Edgewood Drive is the edge of the yellow. So as scary as this map is, I think it actually understates the bird sensitive area in that one instance by 2/3, because I think it's only showing 100 feet. So anyway, I think that really needs more work, and I think there needs to be a contextual element to this. If the first structure isn't for 300 feet, fine. But if you're talking about birds flying past multiple structures, why? How is that 3rd structure any different than the 4th, 5th, or 6th? So I think that needs further investigation. Thanks.
Okay, next we have Commissioner Aiken, then Lou, then Templeton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I second all the concerns I've heard about the definition of the bird sensitive area. I do wonder if it's too complex to be usable in practice and if it accurately captures the areas we're trying to protect. I did reassure myself on one point, though, because I also was concerned about the GM ROM areas near San Antonio, because that's come up in past discussions here at the PTC. The GM area west of 101, I'm reassured about because there are very few trees there, and it is a long way away from any across 101. And most of the ROM area is actually in the bird sensitive area by virtue of the creeks passing through. So interestingly, there are fewer problems there than I anticipated finding when I first looked. I would like to promote the idea that we should be providing better bird protection up to 60 feet. I think that may be the right trade-off to make. And regarding the threat factor, which I believe is on top of packet page 30. Yeah, as has been pointed out, a weighted average is missing a key characterization of the surface there. I am happy to see that it's on each elevation rather than on the building as a whole. So that takes care of the concern that one elevation might be a blank wall and another elevation might be all glass. So I'm glad you captured that one already. But what's missing is a measure of variability. And there are several ways you could go about adjusting that, but the easiest is probably just to say that as a worst case, there must be nothing with a threat factor of, pick a number, 22 or greater. And then the weighted average of 15 gets you the characterization that you really want, as long as you have that maximum in place. So that's all that occurred to me. Thank you.
Commissioner Lou?
Actually, just want to start with one clarifying question, which I failed to ask earlier. Can you confirm in the context of the 40 feet how exactly we define facade.
Facade is basically the one elevation. When you're looking at the like a plan submittal, the facade will be the entire elevation. So I don't know if that.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so it'll include the entire surface area of
Entire
one
surface
direction
area.
of a wall. Wouldn't include any slanted roofs or anything, only the like smooth, flat side of one wall per side.
I think it includes the elevation.
Yeah.
It's the orthographic projection along one axis.
Okay.
Yes, that's,
I think
yeah.
that's, is that helpful? Okay.
If usually when when a planner is looking at a submittal, if it has some sort of a different angle, that's included in that particular elevation. So it'll be looked at together.
Okay.
So if that
Okay.
clarifies.
So anyways, for most facades, I can't exactly picture this, but like maybe 10% of it will be a window anyways. So if we say 90% coverage, we're saying, and if 10% of it is a window, we're saying that then those 10% of windows don't need any bird safe treatment.
That can be, if it is really the 10% of the facade is the windows, that might be correct.
Okay, and if 20% of the facade were windows, then you would need bird safe treatment for half of that, potentially.
Right.
Okay, that is useful clarification, which I would need a second to think about. But I am generally also a little bit concerned around the complexity of this map. I think there's some quirkiness, like the Mayfield soccer complex might be considered a park here, but it's just turf. I think like El Camino Park, I'm not sure if this is considered, not sure totally like what that little squiggle from College Terrace crossing into the research park is. So I think there's some kind of refinement that, or maybe just like a clarification of like pointing out some of the cases that we've mentioned and clarifying that kind of everything is double checked here. My greatest concern is that we create impediments for housing. Up to 2% is still a pretty big difference that could really make a difference for projects penciling out. I would personally be comfortable giving flexibility for non-permanent film installations for housing, and also the housing part of any mixed-use development. I also understand that there's a carve out for retail as well, at least first floor retail. So yeah, would be comfortable with some combination of carve outs or like film satisfying for housing.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Templeton?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm struggling with a couple of the comments that I've heard, and I just want to maybe talk it through. I heard a couple of comments about that this plan would be bad for Eichlers, and I wanted to hear a little bit more about that, and I'll give you my context first, and if you wanted to share a little bit more of your thoughts, that'd be helpful. So that's my first thing. The friends I have that live in Eichlers all have put decals or done something to address bird collisions, and I heard Commissioner Heckman say that he's even experienced them, but he hasn't had to or felt the need to accommodate that with decals. So what was the concern about this with regards to existing Eichlers? If anyone was.
So I was the one who made that comment about the big windows. So if we allow decals for residences, I think that makes sense. I'm not sure decals make sense for big commercial buildings, but my concern was that right now we're saying anything with 24 feet is a problem and that they can't use decals. If I am understanding the code correctly, there's a lot of houses with 24 square feet of glazing, And there are no materials, it sounds like, that are readily available if we do not allow decals. So that's an example where I thought it was too stringent. Yeah.
Was there anybody else that wanted to weigh in on that? Because thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah, just to clarify, I didn't say that I hadn't seen fit to put up decals.
Oh,
We actually have put these like bird magnets on those glass. What I said was we haven't experienced a bird fatality. We've had collisions, but no KSIs.
okay, great. Thank you very much for clarifying that. And yeah, when I was in a house in a that was 3 stories tall, and the birds was always hitting the top window. We couldn't put decals in it. Like, it was very frustrating. So I can sympathize with all of these scenarios we're talking about. I just want to make sure I understood how it affected the ordinance. My second question was just maybe it's more of a comment in response to something Commissioner Liu said. You know, and I'm not trying to single you out, because it's a comment I've heard from many people, but I am concerned about being dismissive of the need to protect the birds if we're going to be building up closer to the wetlands. And it's extremely important. It is so critical a part of the ecosystem we live in. I think it would be best, as you suggested, to maybe look for an alternate way of making sure we're protecting those flight paths, because if we are going to build there, we have a responsibility to protect the bird flight paths. And I recognize it's not what you weren't saying don't protect them, but you were you mentioned, like, how flexible can we be on those kind of buildings requirements, and for me, I'd rather be more restrictive and protective, because I think if we are going to build it in those spaces, we need to be responsible. So that's just my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Is this Commissioner Heckman? Is this in another light? No, ghost light. Okay. So that's the first round of comments. I'm not seeing additional lights. I think the general consensus was that there were a lot of areas that could use some more investigation. So I'm stalling for time to see if anybody has additional comments to make, but if not, then I'm guessing that somebody wants to make a motion to continue this and do some more work on some key areas that we have highlighted.
Yeah, I think we need to do more outreach, both on the builder side, the contractor side, and also talk to Audubon, Sierra Club, and other stakeholders. I think we have good progress. I just think it's not ready for prime time yet. So should we make a motion?
Yeah, does somebody want to make a motion?
How simple do we want to get? Just
Sure. How about I move that we continue this item to a date uncertain for staff to consider the feedback that's already been provided.
sounds good to me. Second.
Commissioner Liu?
Is the feedback clear to staff?
I just wanted to kind of go through some of the big items that were discussed. So applicability wise, is it okay for staff to just consider that the size regulation still, or would the commission would like to see some additional information for modification?
Wouldn't you say the size?
So the 24 square feet applicability?
No, so I heard loud and clear from the commission that on applicability, there's a bird safe area issue.
So the map.
The map is a big issue. I hear every single commissioner, I believe, mentioned concerns about the map and it being potentially too complex for people to understand. There's another area of applicability, which is sort of residential versus larger buildings. And I think there's another area of applicability, which is that 24 square feet the right thing to use? And if so, though, you need to overlay that against bird safe area and residential versus commercial / mixed use. So there's many aspects of applicability.
So just as a kind of to answer Commissioner Liu's question, sorry, just try not to be too loud.
No, you're never too loud, please.
So to answer sort of Commissioner Liu's question, I think it would be helpful to get further direction on sort of whether the commission is comfortable with a bird sensitive area. Like, is that something that you're saying look into the details more for the areas outside of the Baylands and Foothill? So within sort of the flats, is that something that you're generally comfortable with? Or because I've heard sort of a variety of comments about whether, there might be some specific areas that need to be tweaked. Maybe the buffer should be different in different contexts, but it could assist us with bringing something back and sort of continuing those discussions with the advocates as well as developers to understand if there's sort of a general consensus on like whether to kind of keep going in that direction of having a bird sensitive area or really treat it based on the development context outside of the Baylands and Foothill.
Okay, Vice Chair Rectal.
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons I said we should talk with Sierra Club and Audubon. I don't think we have the capability of telling you, but my lay opinion is that if you had a city with not a good canopy and you have some creeks going through it, I think that birds would be drawn to those creeks. In Palo Alto, we have a really good canopy, and I don't think the creeks are really that much of a draw. And so I'm gonna look at that map and see how we isolate these little creek areas, but then ignore the other areas with really good canopy. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me. But that's something that I want the experts to chime in on.
I agree with what Commissioner Ekdahl said. I'm worried about sort of the usability of that map and the practical, like how easy is it going to be for people to know if they're in the bird safe area or not? And I want something that's a little easier to understand. But if that is the right area according to the experts, then okay, then I would love to know that. I'm concerned though, given our canopy and the point that Ms. Cha made about how, so San Francisco looks very different from Palo Alto. And so what is right for San Francisco with respect to birds may not be right to Palo Alto. Same thing for the green building code. And so that's on the other hand, I do think that there was kind of unanimous agreement about the west of Foothill and east of 101 part. My own 2 cents with respect to a bird safe area there is that 101 might not be the perfect dividing line, given all the given our zoning and the heights that are allowed and given bird flight paths, we might actually need to go to, I don't know, Greer or I don't know what the right thing is. Or maybe it's addressed by height. I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is and I don't want to guess.
Just one clarification. So the map itself, the bird sensitive area, it's clear that the council likes to include the west of Foothill and east of 101, depending on that street delineator for the Baylands. For the flatland, there are some questions and there are some ideas with reducing the buffer to 60 feet. We can definitely bring that map back for the commission to consider. And there was also, staff suggested that maybe can be further discussion on whether there should be any bird sensitive area at all on the flatland. So that's another thing to consider as well. In terms of the canopy discussion during the council comments, the canopy discussion was that for the buffer or for the height of the building where the bird treated?
I think it was both.
Okay.
So I think there was a comment about investigating the proper height given our canopy rich city. And then also sort of the validity of using that 300 feet or 60 feet or whatever you do in 1 acre area, that really complex description, given that we have trees everywhere in Palo Alto. So maybe it makes sense to just not have anything at all. I mean, I don't know what the answer is. So,
Understood. I think
Yeah.
that's clear enough direction on that, that basically the bird sensitive area, that criteria that's applies to the buffers from the parks and creeks outside of those two larger consensus sensitive areas. That's something that I think, we can look into in more detail. That being said, I think that there are sort of like limited mechanisms to do like more nuanced maps than that kind of reflect some of the different types of discussion. So we'll do our best to kind of bring back something based on, the discussion and the direction.
okay. Yeah. And please talk to the stakeholders, like the
course,
experts.
yeah.
Were there other, I think the where we left off was wanting to hear what staff heard from us, like kind of the summary that you did for the last item. That was helpful, I think, for the commissioners to feel like they could vote on continuing.
Yeah. Only one last thing that I have that I just want to confirm. I'm hearing consensus essentially on considering temporary decals or something for windows in certain circumstances. So that's kind of my understanding, but just want to make sure that's an accurate understanding of.
And to supplement Mr. Frick's comment, that we should consider that particular methodology for basically for housing and housing portion of the mixed use, not for the non-residential.
All nodding up here.
Did you have
Okay.
any other items?
Other comments from commissioners? Because we have a motion on the table, and so we need to vote on that if there are no additional comments. Okay. Ms. Dow, could you please take the vote?
Commissioner Templeton,
Yes.
Vice Chair Rectal,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Chair Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Aiken,
Yes.
motion carries 6-0.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, staff. Okay, so now we're on to approval of minutes. So we have 4 sets of minutes, and the first one that we need to approve is the draft verbatim minutes of February 28th, 2024.
Move approval as revised.
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Dow?
Commissioner Aiken,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Commissioner Templeton,
Yes.
Vice Chair Rectal,
Yes.
Chair Chang,
Yes.
motion carries 6-0.
I'm wondering if we might be able to speed this process up and approve all the remaining sets of minutes. So maybe if whoever makes the motion could do that.
I have to abstain on 5 and I want to comment on 6.
Okay, so go ahead and,
So let me move item 4, approval of the draft verbatim and summary minutes of March 13th as revised.
Second.
Ms. Dow, could you take the vote?
Ed, did you want to do voice vote instead?
Yeah, let's do a voice vote. All in favor?
I'm sorry, actually,
Oh, sorry.
we do have to do a roll call when there's teleconferencing involved.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry,
for that
everybody.
clarification. No, thank you for not infecting us. All right, go ahead, Ms. Dow.
Chair Chang,
Yes.
Vice Chair Rectal,
Yes.
Commissioner Templeton,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Commissioner Aiken,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
motion carries 6-0.
All right, that brings us to the draft verbatim and summary minutes for March 27th, 2024. Anybody want to make a motion or comment or otherwise on it?
I move approval of the minutes of March 27th.
Has anybody revised them? I don't.
No revision.
Okay. Could I have a second?
Second.
Comments? All right, please, Ms. Dow.
Commissioner Aiken,
Yes.
Chair Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Abstain.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Vice Chair Rectal,
Yes.
Commissioner Templeton.
Yes.
Motion carries 501.
Okay, and then we have the draft verbatim and summary minutes of April 10th, 2024.
So as my fellow commissioners know, I'm pretty, I don't know if it's obsessive or compulsive about reviewing our minutes and revising them. And typically that takes me 15 to 30 minutes. And maybe I make 5 to 10 changes. My experience with the April 10th verbatim meeting minutes was quite different. I don't know if any of my fellow commissioners looked at the revised version, but there are literally hundreds of revisions. And it took me at least an hour and a half to do it. And the reason is that the transcriber of those minutes included every or where I stuttered, repeated 2 words at the beginning of a sentence, included those. I've been reading these minutes for more than 4 years now, and maybe that's how I talk. And maybe every transcriber we've ever had before that has just been kind. But I don't know what was going on with this transcriber, whether they were just performing what they felt was their obligation to do a true verbatim transcription, or if they, get paid by the word and every is another nickel. But I found it highly aggravating. And I have to say, while I was by far the worst offender, none of my fellow commissioners nor staff were immune from this treatment. And, the purpose of our minutes is to create a usable record of our dialogue so that the council can benefit from our discussion. And sometimes in litigation, there can be some clarity about what happened here. But the way these minutes were done, first of all, it was a waste of the transcriber's time to do it that way. It was a colossal waste of my time to try to clean up just my comments. And if I hadn't done it, it would have been a colossal waste of the council's time to try to read through it without being so distracted that they're actually losing the import of the comments. And so I would like staff to deliver a message to this transcriber, whoever they are. And that message is, stop it. And if they tell you they can't or they won't, then please remove them from the rotation. Because if I get another set like that, and I don't think I will, again, 4 years, this is the first time I've seen it, but I will vote to not approve it and to send it back to clean it up. And that's just a waste of everyone's time. So please convey that message. And with that, I will climb down off my pulpit and move approval of the April 10th verbatim and summary minutes as heavily revised.
So Commissioner Templeton has her hand up.
Yes, I wanted to ask staff if you can clarify if these are human translations or AI translations. Like, do we know what would have been at the root cause of this change?
I don't know. We recently switched transcription services, but I don't know if they use the same transcriber for all our minutes or if it's on rotation. But I did tell them to do not include the ums and uhs.
Okay, well, I'm just wondering because I know that there's been a new AA transcription service that is been released in recent months, and I wonder if that could be the explanation. In any case, I agree with Commissioner Heckman that we want to have a higher quality. So even if they are using a tool like that, but they may need to clean it up themselves. Thank you.
So there's a motion on the table. We need a second.
Second.
Do you like any further comments? Just that I noticed the same problem in my own comments. And after looking at myself on video for a little while, I decided I was guilty of all of the ums, ohs, and restarts that were there. But I fully agree with your message to be delivered.
The big thing is that you're wasting council's time because they don't want to watch the whole meeting. They want to just scan through it and get the gist of it. And we want that to be as efficient as possible.
So what I would say is I don't feel comfortable actually, having not done the cleanup, I don't feel comfortable approving these minutes. I would like to send them back and have the service clean it up, because if there are this many ums, and I use a lot of them, then it's not going to be readable or usable. And so I don't see the point in approving unreadable, unusable minutes. No, so we could split it though, because there's the summary minutes, which I could see as being usable. So as currently moved, I would vote no, but I wonder if maybe we could split up the motion.
Sure, I think it's a great idea. So I'll amend my motion to only move approval of the summary minutes of April 10th as revised.
Right, and what says the seconder? Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Discussion on that motion that's on the table? Commissioner Aiken, I think this is a ghost light, right? Okay, so go ahead, Ms. Dow.
Commissioner Templeton,
Yes.
Vice Chair Rectal,
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Chair Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Aiken,
Yes.
motion carries 6-0.
All right, so on to the last half of the minutes.
So let me try a motion. I move that the Planning Commission not accept or approve the April 10th verbatim minutes and return those to the transcribers to remove the ums, uhs, stutters, contractions, because there were those as well.
Other words.
Yes. And make it legible and easily readable as virtually all of the other verbatim minutes that have come across the Planning Commission's desk in recent years have been.
I second that. Do we have any discussion? All right, Ms. Dow.
Commissioner Aiken,
Yes.
Chair Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Vice Chair Rectal,
Yes.
Commissioner Templeton,
Yes.
motion carries 6-0.
All right, thank you, everyone. We're on to our last item of the evening, which is commissioner questions, comments, announcements, or future meetings and agendas. Does anybody have anything? All right, seeing no lights, I adjourn this meeting.
Good night.
Good night.
Night. Feel better.